Biohacking, longevity, lifestyle, supplements, and peptides. So I'll be talking about the various things tonight, including lifestyle, supplements, some drugs. When Lori comes, she actually has taken a few of these drugs and she can talk about her experience with them. Phil, are you doing any of you're not doing any of the, like rapamycin or anything?
No.
Just LSD and...
Well, we know that. Well, here's Lori, so.
I don't take drugs.
Anyway, so I'm going to first of all introduce myself. My background is in my master's degree is in biophysics from UC Berkeley. So I've studied the area of biology and physics. My undergraduate was physics, so I had to go in to do this separate group in biophysics. But I haven't really used it that much. I mostly have been software and computer engineer and database engineer for the last 30 years. But all this time I have had a very strong interest in health, and I've actually continued to explore research in it. Actually, for the last 15 years I worked for UCSF, so I am pretty intimately along the same genre of health sciences. First of all, I want to start with just a breathing exercise. It's called the Wim Hof method, and it's rather a nice way to introduce because it stimulates dopamine. It's actually been proven to stimulate dopamine in the brain, which is kind of like your pleasure area. Very important. So let me start playing this.
Hi guys, welcome. This is a guided breathing session.
So you can breathe along with it as you follow with him. We're just going to do one sequence. So you can just relax and breathe along with this. We're going to go one cycle.
Here we go. Round number one.
Oh, let me say, first of all, you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. In through your nose, out. And it's fairly quick. It's kind of like almost like hyperventilation. And he'll guide us through for, I think, 30 seconds on this one, 30 cycles on this one. Then it'll hold your breath without the out breath. After the out breath, you'll hold your breath for like a minute, and you'll find you think that's a long time. Now, actually, after you breathe in and really oxygenate yourself, you'll find that you actually can do it quite easily. And then you'll take an in breath and hold it for 15 seconds. But we'll just do that one cycle. So just follow along with it.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in.
Now, in nose,
Breathe
out.
out. Go with the flow of the breath. In, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, into the belly, into the chest, and let go. Like a wave. Make it circular. Fully in and letting go. Just keep on going. No pause between inhalation and exhalation. Ten more. Fully in, letting go. Five more. Let's give it all we got. Last one. Fully in and let go. All right. 1 minute breath hold from now on. Be in this moment. Let the body do what the body is capable of doing. Be aware of your heartbeat. Slow it down and just be in this moment. Let that relaxation spread down to your toes, into your fingertips, to the base of your neck and head. You are almost there. Do you want to prolong your breath hold? Pause the video now and continue when you feel the urge to breathe. Okay, recovery breath in, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a deep breath in and hold for 15 seconds. Exhale in 3, 2, 1. Let it go. Round number 2.
Okay, we're only going to do one round of this. There's actually a URL you can go to, and you can do this all the time. Once you get used to it, you can figure out how to do it all the time, and just whenever you're at someplace you want to relax, because it does stimulate dopamine in the brain. I was kind of curious. I've heard about it for a long time, but Andrew Huberman, who's a professor of neurobiology at Stanford, explained how it, because one of his main things is dopamine and in various areas of the brain. So he explained it, that it is very powerful about stimulating dopamine along with some other things. But, so, that is the introduction on this.
Excuse me.
But then when you breathe in through your nose, it stimulates nitric oxide. So,
Big time.
Yeah.
You get a huge, copious amounts of nitrous oxide.
it also said it's a sort of a vibration inside of your the sinuses. So maybe it's echoing through these sinuses that's setting the vibration. I don't know.
Should you be doing that breathing at that exact same pace?
Pretty much. You want to kind of keep it at that pace because it's kind of a little bit, where you're getting hyperventilated a little bit. You want to get your oxygen level up. Then you want to press out with the CO2. Get these things communicating. It really strengthens your lungs, your heart, your cardiovascular system at the same time as stimulating dopamine. So.
Hey Rob, I just want to mention with nitric oxide, that's why it's so important to sleep with your mouth closed at night. I've learned that just recently with people that have snoring issues. That's why they wake up tired in the morning. You sleep with your mouth open. I was a mouth opener sleeper for a long time until I learned, and I sleep much better. And I use like either mouth tape or I use mouth guard. But that's how you get your nitric oxide at nighttime, which is really good for healing and detoxification.
Mm-hmm. And you can use tape. You can, Suzanne was talking about, you can just put tape on your mouth. Unless you have a beard, then it's a little problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, these skin tape that
Use super glue.
is pretty sticky.
Yes.
Okay, formalities. This is just a presentation. I'm not a medical doctor, so take it as a grain of salt. Don't go home and say, this is the world and this is the way it's going to be, because I'm not intending it to be that way. You do it at your own risk. Anything that we talk about, you have to really think about it. Is your body working? It's, a lot of these things, if you are in need of a real healing, see a doctor. If you have some real major problem. The anti-aging stuff works best when your body is doing well, to start with, or maybe a little bit less than well, you're doing okay, but you need to have some stimulation from the different modalities I'm going to talk about tonight. But again, if you really have ailment, this isn't going to heal your ailment. And some of the peptides and supplements and various exercise things I'm going to talk about tonight are not necessarily going to heal Lyme or Epstein-Barr or something like that. It may help, but it isn't something that's going to be, okay, this is it, I'm going to practice this forever and ever. So, just want to mention that these formalities, and we can start. Why am I giving this class? We're not getting any younger. Yet, I borrowed this from one of the professors at the Buck Center up here in Nevada. And I really like that saying, so sorry I borrowed it. But, and we're all facing aging. And we're going to have, most of us will have some health problems or health crisis as we move into our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s, 110s. 122. 122 is kind of the oldest. They found somebody. A woman was 122.
Comment.
Yeah.
Don't have that.
So, maybe it's not an outer limit. And there's a lot of emerging sciences from very reputable universities.
We left out the Chinese guy who lived to 256.
Good question, data.
Yeah, questionable data. There's data in some places in the world that they don't really know when they were born, so they just make up things to impress the communities. Don't know, but at least as verified. I don't know about 256, but that's the number of colors in the ASCII
Or
table.
127.
Pardon?
127 or 122, it's one of those two.
122 is what I heard.
That's
So
a comment, yeah.
It's a
Maybe.
French lady.
Yeah, 122.
we'll go with that for the moment. But anyway, so it's something to shoot forward to. A lot of emerging data from very reputable universities. I mentioned Buck Institute up here in Nevada, which have a bunch of researchers and scientists working. Back at like Harvard, you have David Sinclair, who's a very prominent one. And back at MIT, at UCSF where I work, there is a couple who are working on aging, particularly in the psychology area and so on. UCLA, there's Walter Longo down at USC, who does, it's not so much an age, but he does a lot in terms of how to do intermittent fasting and cure different problems with that, and diet and so on. So it's not just, biohackers are doing this right now, like we are. Because I do assume that most of us, to some extent, are biohackers. I've been that way for a long, long time. And I just think it's fun, it's interesting, and as long as we don't damage ourselves, I think it only can help. Why we age. These are the hallmarks of, 12 hallmarks of aging now. There was about 8 or 9 up until recently, and then they've added a couple like chronic inflammation and dysbiosis. Dysbiosis has got problems and so on. Chronic inflammation is definitely one that they should have added a long time ago. I remember a number of years ago I was talking with a physician and she was saying something about, inflammation isn't going to cause any, she's a hematologist, so she's not going to cause any real problem. It won't cause any things like contribute to cancers or heart disease. And now we know it's absolutely critical for all these things. So I'm not going to go into each one of these too much. Genomic instability, and the genes get damaged in some ways through radiation or caustic things inside. Toxins that we take into our food or breathe into our air, or as we generate our ATP, our energy in our cells, that produces what is called ROS, reactive oxygen species. And these reactive oxygen species are very, very potent and will damage the cell, damage the cell walls, damage the genome, cause breakage in the genome. So that's really what genomic instability is. Telomere attrition. The telomeres are like this. I have the end of the shoelaces. This little clip on the end, the plastic end, that kind of keeps it from fraying. The same thing is true with telomeres on the end of the DNA molecule, the DNA strand. It keeps it, every time it divides, the telomeres actually shorten a little bit because it uses some of the nucleotides, which are the codes inside the DNA, and it takes some of those things and replenishes them and helps kind of heal the DNA when it does the division. Epigenetics, we've probably all heard about epigenetics in recent years, which is really how the gene expresses itself into the world. And it has to go out and has to be able to duplicate different parts of the genome to be able to produce proteins, and proteins is the expression of everything into the world. It comes out of the nucleus and tells the ribosomes to create a protein, and it goes into another area and bends and folds these proteins. Remember, they're three-dimensional. They're not just flat sort of things. So they're three-dimensional, and they're charged plus and minus, so they have to fold in certain ways. that are important. Otherwise, it's going to be working incorrectly. So you have these this mechanism that actually misfolds and unfolds things and finds things that are problematic, and so that the protein that gets out becomes expressed as hormones or parts of a cell wall or structures in your whole body and so on, bone, eye, whatever, brain, neurons. And that is the next, proteolysis is really the loss of it, which is actually folding of proteins. It's like integrity in the proteins. Autophagy is actually the breakdown of cells. Autophagy is another way. Some people call it autophagy, or some people call it autophagy, but it's actually the breakdown of cells. When cells become, they've got damage in them, and it actually happens in your mitochondria, which are the energy batteries of the cell. Those actually have something called mitophagy also. So they break down too, but you've got hundreds or thousands of these little organelles that charge like the batteries in there. But if a cell becomes damaged, it can't reproduce very well, then it has to be, basically the immune system takes it and chews it up and uses the amino acids and fats and reuses them inside the body at different parts and sends it into so the cell can grab those things and reproduce and make more proteins. Nutrient sensing, that's really where your body, the cell can't sense the nutrients coming in as much. And one of the areas that happens is in the gut. The immune system and the cell walls in your gut actually have little feelers that stick out into the intestines and see what's coming by, and like saying, oh, there's a protein, there's a sugar, there's amino acid, that's something I don't want, it's a bacteria that I don't recognize. They actually can recognize bacteria, or your bacteria in your gut can actually help recognize bacteria and actually assist in this whole process. There's this mucus layer and this whole thing. But what happens is when you lose your sense of sensing of nutrients coming in. Now I put one thing down here called winter's coming. When we were young, evolutionarily, it's this kind of interesting thing that I've learned recently, and that is we only usually had fruits and fructose in our diet in the summers and late and falls, and usually what it said to the body was, guess winter's coming, which means I have to stock up and I have to put on fat, like a bear does when it hibernates. It just puts on lots of fat, which may be one of the reasons why high fructose corn syrup and other things may causing some weight problems in our society now. So it's just a natural thing the body actually kind of understands. So that's a dysregulation or nutrient sensing. Mitochondrial, which is one area that I'm most fascinated with, is mitochondrial dysfunction. That means that battery charger that's literally is like a battery no longer works and functions as well. As we age, there's literally like 160 millivolts between one part of the inner part of the mitochondria and the middle part of it, in the cell that sits in the cell wall that sits in between. And that 160 gets too low, and as you get older, it seems to get smaller and smaller, which means it doesn't give you as much potential energy. So you feel tired when you get older, or like when you get sick. Your body actually is, when you get sick, your body's actually sending some signals out through the mitochondria that needs to direct those things to the immune system. But it doesn't need to you don't need to build muscle at that time. So it's kind of important. So your mitochondria is a sensing organism for the whole body. Incidentally, mitochondria, you have, some cells have a couple of hundred, some have a few thousand. Ovaries have almost 100,000 mitochondria. So it's kind of interesting. And mitochondria actually can migrate inside of nerves to the end of where the axon is, which is where the exchange of molecules happens, like serotonin and dopamine and so on. Cellular senescence, well, cellular senescence is something that is only in the last number of years become very, very important, because they realize that the cells do get old, but the problem is the body doesn't break them down. For some strange reason, it just doesn't break them down. We don't know exactly why, but one of the, it may be that, and I'll get into this in a moment, but we're getting so much input in food into our diets all the time. It doesn't really have to worry about amino acids and fats and so on, because it's got a plentiful supply coming in every single day. And it goes, instead of, usually when we had starvation at times, if you're out in the savannah someplace and you have starvation, then your body's going to go into this cycle where it shuts down a little bit, and it will use up those things in your body, like older cells, and starts to digest them and pull the parts out of them that it needs. But they hang around, and the problem with that is they start eking out inflammation into the rest of the body, which is definitely not good.
Isn't that why fasting is so important? That's why fasting has become so popular. Because you're giving your body that opportunity to not have to eat and consume. Like you said, you're not getting that replenished amount of food. So when you're fasting, your cells have to work harder to thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to talk about fasting a little bit?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Intermittent fasting, even fasting. Stem cell exhaustion. Stem cells are in every part of our body. Like the hairs on there's the base of the hair in there. There's stem cells that actually help replace that hair so it can regrow. And when you one of the biggest problems with running in aging is you start getting, these stem cells no longer function well, or you're just running out of stem cells. So at that point, you may lose hair, your hair may turn gray, skin may be getting to be rough, or any part of your body can be a problem. Cellular communication is just all the different things that happen between the body, different parts of the body, hormones and so on, like lack of lowering of growth hormone, lowering of testosterone and estrogens and so on. It means that your body doesn't work quite as well. Chronic inflammation, I already mentioned, very important, because it's just realized how important this inflammation happens in the body. And dysbiosis, I mentioned, is the gut gets inflamed, or for many different reasons. Gluten. Suzanne has gluten. So genomic instability. This is just a little where you can see there's a breakage to that strand that the body has to figure out, and then the cell has to figure out in the nucleus. Mostly what are called sirtuins will come in and actually help repair that. Sometimes it can't totally do it, and at that point the cell may actually say, I have to be removed, have to commit suicide basically. There's nucleotides, the bases that they get destroyed in some way. Could be from an X-ray, could be from reactive oxygen species, as I mentioned before, which are these oxidants that happen, and there's not an antioxidant there to stop it, like vitamin C or glutathione. And there's many other things.
And toxins and medications and all that contribute,
All sorts of things. I mean, even medications will do it.
Probably the two top ones.
Yeah, these things cause lots of problems in the different areas. Cellular senescence. That was just kind of this is to explain what I just mentioned about the faulty DNA damage, so that the DNA, the exact sequence of DNA that's kind of like a code. And when the body comes along, the proteins inside of the nucleus come along, and they try to match exactly these nucleotides, which says turn this on, this one off, turn this one on. then it goes out and creates these proteins out in the other part of the cell. That gets damaged, so that's faulty epigenetics. Transcription, misfolded proteins. So the cell's no longer viable, and you have autophagy and mitophagy and so on. Our cleanup mechanism is, as we age, starts to get to be a problem. There's things inside the cell itself literally go along, and they're supposed to break these proteins apart, break down the amino acids, not the amino acids, but break them apart, the fatty acids and so on. It's just not working as well as it should. Some of these things are what we're going to talk about in interventions. So I'm telling you some of these things that can go wrong, but hopefully some of these interventions, as we begin to understand them, and at the very last piece I'll talk about is some of the most recent science that's really phenomenal in terms of maybe stuff that's going to happen in the next 10 years. Mitochondrial dysfunction. As I mentioned, you have thousands of these mitochondria in cells, and each one is like a little battery. And of that battery, as I mentioned, the voltage in that battery is getting lower and lower and lower. And so it has to produce what are called ATP, which is the currency of all the whole body. Currency, it's like a charge, and kind of biochemical charge. And it is so important that you could not live more than 10 to 30 seconds after all the ATP depleted. Interesting thing about ATP, you produce almost your body weight in ATP every single day. And you're going to go, how is this possible? I mean, I weigh 190 pounds. I mean, how am I going to create that much in body weight? But, well, because these happens billions of times a second, literally, inside of all these cells, inside the mitochondria in these cells. And they last for just a short period of time, like microseconds. Then it turns from one type ADP to ATP, just loses a phosphorus molecule. And that's part of how it gives energy to the mitochondria, but also to the sirtuins inside the cell, which help clean and make repair the DNA and other parts of the cell. So it's so important that these ATP, and we'll get to it in a moment, which is called NAD. And so NAD depends on you get NAD from niacin. Niacin, which you know is a B vitamin, B3. And you have niacin. If you had too much pure niacin, sometimes you get a flush, and something which is kind of fun, or not, if you've had it. But niacin is one of these critical elements that actually it's tryptophan. Tryptophan can turn into niacin in the body, and then that goes through this chain to become NAD. And NAD is, if ATP is the charge of the thing, the currency underneath the charge is NAD. And that's what we can actually help supply to the body, either through niacin or its downstream molecules, or through taking some things that I'll mention in a couple of minutes. Incidentally, sirtuins, as I mentioned, there's different ones for the nucleus, and there's one for the mitochondria, and there's ones for the whole cell itself. And these pretty much direct everything in the cell. There are actually genes that are these sirtuins that turn these off and on, and so critically important for every part of the cell function. Chronic inflammation, dysbiosis. I just wanted to touch on this because I've added these two together in this part of the hallmark of aging, because we've learned so much recently about the microbiome, all the bacteria in our gut, and the more and more we find out about it, how it causes problems with, it's so critically important for us because it generates food for our cells in the gut lining, but it also can cause real problems because particularly the surface of some of these bacteria are highly toxic and your body absorbs them and it causes huge amounts of inflammation. But it also can damage the cell. There's that lining inside your, the cells of the cell wall of the intestine is very thin, like 1 molecule thick and so on. And it has these things called tight wall junctions or junctions. So it can open these cells up like this and force water out. So we get a diarrhea. That's often because your the blood pushes out liquids into in the colon or into the intestines to flush things out. It says, I don't want this bacteria in there. I don't want these viruses or this toxic stuff. So it just pushes them out. Well, unfortunately, they open these things, and certain things like gluten, the part of gluten called gliadins, can actually act to actually open these things up, and it can allow certain things like gluten to sneak in, and bacteria and bacterial waste to go into the body. The liver has to deal with these things. They go directly to the liver. The liver has to process them. There's about 80% of your immune system sits in your gut too, so it sits behind here testing all these things. It gets inflamed. And now they're beginning to, I just read a study they're doing at UCSF where some people from UCSF and then people are in coordination with UC Berkeley, the Jennifer Dowd now, who got the Nobel Prize for CRISPR. She and the two labs are cooperating in terms of changing certain bacteria, the genetics of that bacteria in such a way that it can help assist for people with asthma. So we can actually tune down asthma. And then more and more we're going to find these things where we can manipulate bacteria to be more positive, even the ones that are problematic. And bacteria are now known to be involved in psychosis, schizophrenia, heart disease, autoimmune disease. It's pretty amazing what's happening. So that's why dysbiosis is so important and why there are a lot of things we can do.
Don't eat wheat. Because it also, it actually damages the fibrous, or these filaments that you're talking about that actually, the hairs that protect from going through it, it actually wears them down, and nobody really should be eating it. But we're not being told that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Some people have a lot of reaction to them, and some people a little bit, but it does.
Yeah, if you don't have digestion issues, it doesn't mean it's not affecting you. It's all the other things, organ damage and heart disease and obesity and all that stuff. It's amazing.
And obesity is one of the other things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big one. What can we do? Interventions. I mean, you all come here and you don't want to be here all the negative stuff and so on, but you want to figure out some interventions. Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about those things that are free, because we do them every day, but we just need to change how we do them. And then I'm going to talk about those that cost a little bit and some that cost somewhat more. And then you can choose which ones you want to try, maybe to augment certain things. Sleep. Sleep is so important, and one of the reasons I'm going to talk about why is, and I'll talk about, there's 4 stages of sleep. We all hear about REM sleep, which is the light stage of sleep where we do a lot of dreaming. That's the 4th stage. But there's 1, 2, and 1 is very light, and it gets deeper. And then the deepest sleep is the 3rd stage of sleep. And there's so much they're finding out about this stage of sleep because this is when growth hormone, particularly in the first cycles of the night, the first couple of sleep cycles, which last about 60 to an hour and 20 minutes. And this deep sleep, the growth hormone gets released, and then your body's in this point of regeneration at this point, because that's when your sleep is really supposed to, your muscles are relaxing, your digestion is slowing down, and it's time to clean up the cells, which we'll talk about how it cleans up the brain in a second, but it cleans, gets rid of these things and then starts repairing them and building them up. So that's what growth hormone facilitates in doing. As you grow older, you have less growth hormone. We can talk about at the very end how we can actually augment some of that too. One of the most fascinating is called the glymphatic flow. Glymphatic is a system inside of the brain that literally the parts of the brain shrink a little bit. And what happens, it's a coordinated effort during this deep sleep, and your body's kind of very much relaxed and deep in the deepest thing, so it doesn't have to pay attention to the rest of the body. And it goes through this wave, and every time a pulse happens down a neuron, the neuron actually, because it's exchanged between potassium and sodium and different things, it actually slightly, the width of that neuron actually increases slightly. And when they do all pulse together, it actually causes this wave to be able to force the liquids out of the different areas of the ventricles in the brain and can actually flush it out. I mean, this is one of the things that I learned not too long ago from a neurologist, and it was like phenomenal. How I knew about this glymphatic system, but I had no idea on how the nerves literally cooperate in the brain during this deep sleep. And this is why the deep sleep, particularly the first couple of phases of it at night, are so important. Because what it does is gets rid of all this junk that your body builds up. And your brain is thinking. As right now, all these dopamines, serotonins, and so on are flying in there. And these things actually have some fairly toxic byproducts. Mitochondria are producing these reactive oxygen species. All this stuff's happening. And when it wants to get rid of this at night, now it can't normally flow out through the blood because of the blood-brain barrier. So it actually has to find other ways to be able to flush it out. So this is how it works, which is totally fascinating to me.
Rob, do you know the time? Is it 10 to 12 or 12 to? Because that's the thing, nobody's going to bed early anymore, so they aren't getting those opportunities for the brain to do what it needs to do.
It seems like your body is able to figure out when your first phase is going to happen. So if you're really late going to bed at 11 o'clock, maybe it will start then. Some people think it still isn't as strong, that you should get into bed by 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10. Incidentally, you probably should stop your latest meal, and I'll talk about that in intermittent fasting, and phenolics and so on, which is to get rid of these dead cells. Your body will go through these different cycles, but maybe there is just this genetic need to go to bed at certain times that helps the body out the most. Sleep in darkness. Like the lights that are shining on me right now are not good for sleep. This is particularly blue light. You hear about these blue blocking glasses. They actually do work. I have a pair. I don't have them with me. I forgot them. But they actually do really help you when you're looking at screens because it blocks the blue light that comes out. Blue light's very important, critically important in the morning because it turns the body on and says, cortisol, I want you to stimulate. This is the biggest point of waking you up. It starts the whole process of the body during the day. But melatonin is what happens at night. Starting about 9 o'clock at night, melatonin starts kicking in. And because you're supposed to be getting darker and darker and darker. And you notice a lot of your screens and so on and computer will actually, after a certain period of time, let's say set to 9 o'clock at night, it turns redder. The screen may turn a little bit redder, which is less of a stimulus. There's literally, and I don't have it, or do I have it on here? Pardon?
The F.Lux program specifically does that.
Yes.
What is it?
It's a program you can download called Flux, F.Lux, and you set what time you go to sleep, and it starts to turn the screen darker and redder, and less blue light comes out of it. And so,
You can set your phones to do that too.
Yeah.
and it also tells you you're waking up in 8.5 hours or whatnot.
And that's the good one. There's actually ones for the opposite, which will wake you up and it starts out very dark and then it starts getting brighter and brighter to the point where it's a lot of blue light, like the sun. Of course, here's the best thing, and that is we kind of live inside these days, almost invariably. The best thing to do is to walk out in the sun in the morning. There's something at the bottom, the back of the retina of the eye, and this is so important because the sun shines down to that, and it starts stimulating something that goes back into the brain through the pineal gland, turns off melatonin, and actually stimulates certain cycles that are the cortisol cycles, and basically wakes you up to prepares your brain and the rest of your body for the day. So this is important. So you can in the morning. I live on a lay of a hill, so I don't really have to walk up the top of the hill and look at the sun, but even for a few minutes, or you can get kind of this sort of lights, lux type of light. You get 10,000 lux lights that you can literally put out in front of you so it shines down into your eyes like this. And it will do the same thing. It just wakes your brain up, wakes your whole body up. And it's part of the whole cycle that's really good and important.
So is sunset opposite?
Yeah.
To do the good sunset circadian rhythm?
Yep. And it's the circadian rhythm. It's so important for that circadian rhythm because that tells your body to keep in cycle. And if it gets out of cycle, because you're going like let's say you're at midnight, you're still on your phone or your computer, and there's a blue light in there, the body kind of doesn't shut down. It gets off on that circadian cycle. And you don't want that because that is what tunes every part of your body, the hormones, the brain, even the cells. And I'll talk about that in just a minute on how it does that. Because we're so used to melatonin, we take melatonin at night and so on, but there's melatonin generated inside the cell, and I'll talk about that in a second. So that's sleep, but it's free. You can do this and you can really start working with your sleep cycles. Food and feeding. This is where we can get into intermittent fasting. Even fasting itself is really quite good because it's one of the few things that has actually been shown. I remember going up to the Buck Institute about 10 years ago or so, or 15 years ago now, and a lot of these people were trying to starve themselves basically, and they were like really thin, and because they're hoping to live to 1,000 or whatever, simply because they've been heard that mice and so on, that they deprive of food live longer. Now we find that we don't really have to do that because we can use intermittent fasting. And what is intermittent fasting? What it basically says is there's a certain feeding period in your body, in your day. Let's say it's an 8-hour period of feeding or 10 hours of feeding. That means you eat during that period of time, and then you don't eat the rest of that cycle. So let's say it's 8 in the morning to 6 at night. That's 10 hours. And or 12 hours, you can even go like 8 to 8. It still helps. There's a guy named Sachin Panda down at Salk Institute at UC San Diego, and he's been testing it on firefighters and so on. Even a 12-hour feeding cycle, as long as you kind of keep to it, actually assists the body healing itself. Because what it does is your body is, earlier I mentioned this thing of food deprivation. What happens is your body goes, okay, I need about somewhere around 6 to 8 hours after you stop eating, your body goes, I need food. And so it breaks down, the liver starts releasing glycogen, which is the kind of glucose and so on. It is glucose basically. And into the body, and the cells pick this up, but that lasts a short time, an hour or two. After about 8 to 10 hours, your body's going, okay, I'm hungry. At this point, most of us, a lot of people eating this 24-hour or 18-hour schedule, your body never really gets to this point. So what happens, Bill?
Yeah, I've been I eat 4 hours a day, and I've been doing that for my window. I've been doing that for a couple of years now, and I'm in my 80s, and I feel like it's amazing. Mm-hmm. I feel light. I feel clean.
What are the 4 hours that you eat?
I started eating about 12 o'clock, and and stop eating about 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And you don't get hungry. I never get hungry
After a while, you don't. Yeah,
because my body's burning fat. And
it is. So what it does is it goes, looks around and goes, okay, I don't have any glucose in here, and there's no readily fat running around in my body, so it goes out and finds these things. It goes out to the fat cells of your body, and they're perfectly happy to give up some fat and process them down, turn them into ketones if they need to for the brain. The brain can use ketones and glucose. Ketones are actually a type of a fat that the brain can use, and actually uses quite well. In fact, I was listening to a professor back at Harvard, who's a psychiatrist, and he treats schizophrenics and psychosis and so on with ketogenic diets. They've known about this for epilepsy for almost a century, but now they're starting to treat. He can get results where medications can't even touch it.
And bipolar disorder.
In bipolar. So.
You have to be monitored. A lot of people think they can just go on a ketogenic
Yeah.
diet and eat all those cookies and all that stuff. It says keto this and keto that, doesn't work.
No,
But yeah, it has to be closely monitored.
it does.
Because it can be risky, but it does help.
It does, and it's because the brain can burn these ketones, and it's a cleaner burning, and it actually gives a little more energy than glucose. Everybody knows about the standard American diet, I think. Probably most of you in here are not even, don't partake most of the time. Maybe a little once in a while. Maybe McDonald's or something else, or the pizza happens, but hopefully not too much. Just heard a report this morning that can be damning to those who are. It looks at the very best diet. This is by cardiologists and so on. I don't necessarily always trust what they say because they don't. They look at general studies, and general studies work on a mass population of people. Mediterranean diet is known to be quite good, and it does has lots of fruits and vegetables, certain amount of grains and beans and so on, a lot of olive oil and wine, which probably not too good. They say that 1 to 2 drinks a week is probably maximum for alcohol, because your body, it's very much a poison. It comes into the body, into the liver, and it has to be detoxified to be able to use it, and kind of narrows it, takes it down to a less toxic form, actually acetone, which is a ketone. So, there's a group that put together really look closely at how much protein you get. As you get older, you need a little more protein. When you're younger, your body processes it really well. You digest those cells in these phenolic cells and so on, and starts breaking them down. And they're amino acids, so they're strung together. So it's taking these things apart and using them for rebuilding other cells. But you don't do as well with that when you age. So you need a little bit more protein. They recommend 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per every kilogram weight. So I'm about 80-some kilograms, so I have to be 100 to 120 grams of protein a day, which actually seems a different amount. You can get it pretty easily from meat if you had like a half a pound of steak or something. But if you're a vegan or something, that's probably about 6 to 8 cups of beans and things like that. So, but you can take some good. Some of these protein powders and so on, and take a couple of shakes every day, and that can actually supply some pretty good protein for you, and so it makes up for it.
Nuts.
Nuts do well.
Avocado. I mean, there's no things.
I like avocados, yeah.
Not too much.
So you say, watch out that much protein does not add too much carbohydrate load to the diet. Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, again, if you have 6 to 8 cups of beans and rice, that's a lot of carbs.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Versus,
So, it will tend to do is, luckily those things that are digested slowly, it doesn't raise your blood sugar too much, and or stimulate your insulin. But the problem with stimulating insulin, your glucose comes into the liver and it stimulates the pancreas to secrete insulin. That comes out back into the liver decides to put it out into the body, and it latches on to these glucose molecules and ushers it off to the cell. And then what comes to the outside of the cell doesn't sit there and go, oh, I gotta have this. It doesn't say that you just arrived, it's gonna say, I need it. So if the cell needs it, it's gonna tell the insulin molecule, secrete me, and so it secretes one thing called GLUT4. And that will latch it to pull that glucose molecule inside the cell. It makes a little transformation, does a thing called glucolysis, which actually creates various things, and then it sends it into the mitochondria and produces energy for your cell. If you have too much and your body is getting lots and lots of carbs all the time, then it may be that your body has to deal with those carbs in some ways. Oftentimes it's just going to shove them off to the fats. If it gets too high, and particularly as we get older, we tend to get more insulin resistant. That means the cell cannot take in that much glucose. Or the cell itself says, I don't need any more right now. Go off to the next cell and see if it needs something, this glucose. Or it can turn them into ketones inside the cell. Hey, Dan?
Rob, where do eggs fit in a diet in terms of protein versus fats and so on?
Well, eggs are really quite good. We had the cholesterol scare, but the cholesterol molecule that comes in from those fats is a pretty large molecule, and your body doesn't tend to absorb it. So they bypass that whole thing. It's no longer external exogenous protein. Cholesterol is no longer a big concern. Incidentally, if you listen to a guy named UCSF named Robert Lustig, you can see his video. He's an endocrinologist at UCSF, and he's got a couple of books out, but he talks about not only can you cure a lot of type 2 diabetes with diet alone, but because that sugar levels are lower, the insulin levels are lower, it starts affecting the LDL cholesterol and lowering that. So it actually makes your heart healthy too.
Actually, research has shown that people with higher levels of LDL live a lot longer and have a lot less dysfunctional brain disease.
Yeah, we need the cholesterol for our brain.
We need that.
We do. It's just it's called very low density or low density. And the very low density, depending on a certain genes called APOB, that one, some of those people have genetic problems with cholesterol. And you have to be careful with some of these people, and you should be tested. Whether your doctor can test that. But you're right.
And it depends on the size of the cholesterol.
Yeah.
There's small density and then there's larger. The larger is fine. The small is what causes the problem.
Cholesterol is just a fat. It's needed in the cell wall of every cell of our body. It makes up our hormones like testosterone and estrogen and so on. So people don't realize, and they've made it a bad thing, but it's absolutely essential. Without cholesterol, you'd fly on the ground and it'd be it.
Isn't there also oxidized LDL?
There is.
I remember seeing, and not oxidized.
Yeah.
That's the difference there.
You don't need it for your diet, you can make cholesterol too.
You make cholesterol. Every cell of the body makes
Yes,
it.
And the
yeah.
liver.
So where's this panel of experts? Who's the panel of experts that deemed 1.2 to 1.5 grams?
It's hard to tell. I found it in forget his first name, Hyman. He's a well-known functional Mark Hyman, back at Cleveland Clinic. He's just gotten a book on life extension, and I just heard him talk about that. So he's the one that quoted it, but I haven't verified it. I'm assuming he's pretty good because he does good research.
As a bodybuilder, I want to throw in some countervailing evidence, which is that you need a lot more protein than that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you exercise, you have to throw in your fitness level. But I was always told, I'm a health coach, so I was always told the palm of for your body size, the palm of your hand is the size of amount of protein you should be eating. And but I
Well, you have a
exercise.
large home.
But yeah, you might have it, but I exercise. So I'm a bike rider and I'm a hiker and I've got a high metabolism, so I need more. And I could feel it.
I would say that's not nearly enough.
For everybody's different, but that's a general rule for the amount, because people just get kind of confused on the ounces and how much you're supposed to have, and you need, and it also depends on how you feel. I mean, my husband and I both feel like crap when we're not eating protein. We try not to, because we want to be careful, but we're active, and so you gotta balance all that, and it's the quality of the protein that matters too.
Yes.
Another thing with the eggs, because I've been around this circle with this one, I don't feel good. There's a whole thing about eggs, and they can make you, if you eat them and you're tired afterwards, then it's not the food for you. Because some people get drained with them. But there's a lot bigger things that are a problem than eggs in our diet, and it's not eggs. So, when we're talking about cholesterol.
I love eggs, but I'm allergic to them.
You know, if you get eggs and they're not free range chickens, then they're feeding them grains. So you're eating grains. If you get free range eggs from free range chickens.
Well, they're pastured eggs is what
Yeah,
they're saying.
then you're gonna get all the different nutrients in the right amount.
But
Then
for
they're also-
orange yolks.
Free range just.
Orange yolks, yeah.
Orange
That's a
yolks.
good
Yeah,
point.
no, you need
Darker
pastures.
the
Not
yolk,
good grains,
more
so yeah,
nutritious.
pastures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pastures are getting
Yeah, whatever.
Rob,
Also,
For
the,
Yes,
those of
Kyle?
us who do protein shakes,
Pardon?
for those of us who do protein shakes,
Yeah.
there's so many different forms of protein powder now.
Yeah.
And there's so many different types of, oat milk, almond milk.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you think is, the best choices with that?
Just so it looks to be a complete protein. Like pea protein is reasonably decent. I think that's a pretty decent one that I have. I like the ones that are mixed and sometimes are actually pre-digested a little bit. I suggest as we get older we have enzymes. We take enzymes. We take a couple of these enzymes with each meal. Our body doesn't secrete as much. See, what happens is you get, for protein, your saliva and so on says, protein's coming, comes down your stomach, your gut. The hydrochloric acid stimulates, it opens up these proteins. The peptide breaks that little peptide bond in there, and then that turns it more into amino acid. It goes down a little bit further, breaks it down further. If you have too low of not enough hydrochloric acid, that causes a problem. If you get down further into the gut, you're not secreting these pancreatic enzymes that break down the amino acids and fats and so on. The bile that comes out of your liver is not enough to emulsify the fats, to absorb them. There's this whole thing. And then there's this layer of mucus that sits inside there that kind of covers the whole intestine and protects it. That one's too thin and there's inflammation happening, kind of sends things too quickly through. So I would suggest pancreatic enzymes. Some people, they need more hydrochloric acid to stimulate, but a good, take a couple with each time when you start. I think that's a good thing. So I think it helps. Unfortunately, there are shakes sometimes since they kind of go through pretty quick the stomach, so they may not be broken down as much. But then again, meat is meant to be broken down. So if you chew it enough, but you're not really, may not be broken down enough even in your mouth, or you chew it. So shakes can be pretty good for supplementing protein. As you were mentioning, one of my daughters is a trainer, and she's really trying to build, and so she uses 1 gram per pound of body weight.
over time.
Yeah, instead of kilogram. So 2.2 kilograms per pounds per kilogram. So a lot more for some people in the bodybuilding and so on, particularly if you're going to build muscle. So.
just make sure you're getting organic protein powders, and they're so full of stuff in them. The ingredient, I quit eating them. They're full of crap, and they also have tons of sugar. They're not healthy. And the other big in protein shakes, I just don't do them. I make shakes. Believe me, I do my shakes, but they're green powders, and I use spirulina. I use all kinds of beetroot powder is really good. There's a whole collection of things I do. But hemp seed is your answer for protein.
Yeah.
Because I make hemp seed milk now. I love it. I have a Vitamix. I put vanilla in it. I put a little bit of stevia, but you can blend it up and make it nice and frothy. It doesn't last like a container of milk. But the point is I think it's 3 tablespoons of hemp seed is equivalent of the amount of protein we need, 12 to 13 grams of protein. We're talking about the equivalent of a steak. And vegans and vegetarians use it a lot because it is a complete protein.
Is that
Omega
liquid
3.
hemp seed or is it little
Just
nuts?
the seeds.
The little seeds,
Little
and I buy
seeds.
them at Good Earth, and I blend the heck out of them with my water, and I put vanilla, and I put, just good filtered water, and it's delicious. Now, it's an acquired taste, but then I use that as opposed, you gotta be careful with all these milks. These alternative milks are not clean.
Sure.
Oh my God, no, they got carrageenan, they've got, they're putting industrial seed oils in, like canola and safflower oils, which are totally cardiovascular, anyway, sorry. But hemp seed is a great thing, I love my hemp seed.
So which alternative milk would you recommend? Hemp
There's
milk?
2 brands that I highly recommend at the local stores that are clean. There's an almond milk, there's an oat milk. Malk, is it M-A-L-K? Do you guys know the little jug? Malk, M-A-L-K. All they have is oats or almonds, water, and salt. That's all you want in your ingredients. And then there's one called 3 Trees. And 3 Trees makes a almond, they make a sesame, they make a, I think it's sesame and almond. You'll see them at Good Earth. Grocery stores carry them, but most of the stuff is so bad, you guys. I'm sorry to say. The ingredients are so bad. And that's what's really doing so much harm, is all these, ready-made things that are supposedly, we're not meant to eat that many almonds.
Well, I want to make one comment. I notice I haven't found any kind of organic pea protein anywhere.
Yeah, it's
And
hard to find.
and I'm aware that unless something's organic, it's
Yep.
usually also grown with Roundup.
GMO.
And that means glyphosate
Who knows what else?
and the thing is that there've been so much Roundup used in American-grown almonds that that the Chinese and the German didn't even buy it. It was given over to the Americans. Okay, so I think that paying attention to organics is really important.
It is.
And I can promise you that every one of you in this room, right here, right now, urinates Roundup on a regular basis, every day.
Yeah, I know, I just go out and kill weeds with it.
And I've seen several people dying of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma who use Roundup with their landscaping and also.
Jacinta has a question for you.
I was just going to say,
Sorry.
Phil turned me on to this company. It is organic. I will say it does have some, it tastes sweet. It's too sweet. I have to.
Stevia.
What's the
I'm
sweet
allergic
tea?
to stevia.
What's the sweet though? Is it stevia?
I think it's stevia.
Which I've heard lots of
But it is organic, it is pea protein, and I was just going to say, but I could even let all you taste it and it's just too sweet.
Organic pea protein specifically?
Well, the thing says organic, it could be
No,
lying.
no. You have to look a little more fully on the label.
Because sometimes
Because
it'll
it could be an
highlight the things that are
organic, it could be a different organic protein and doesn't have the USDA label on it.
Yes,
It does?
yes.
Well, you need to read whether it's organic.
It says organic protein, so I don't know.
My eyes aren't.
Neither am I.
It does have.
We need that
It
peptide
does
for the
say
eyes.
organic pea protein.
Yes.
This company, I use their,
He's the one who turned me on.
when you grind up powders, these proteins into powders, like, your body sees it as sugar, so you have to be careful because it'll raise your glucose.
They're so processed.
Yeah.
It's better to do if you can get it from other sources, but.
Interesting.
Yes.
Oh, for
Now,
sure.
Another good one, you guys, sorry, I don't know if you know Optimal Health Institute, San
Sure.
Diego.
Oh, it's fine.
I had the good fortune of going in January. Another great thing to add is wheatgrass. Oh my God, wheatgrass
Especially if you're
has,
not allergic to wheat like I am.
well, and I'm allergic to wheat.
I don't want
Against that.
Wheatgrass
Pardon me?
is different.
There's
It's
I've
different.
seen whole presentations about how wheatgrass is one of these pseudo healthy
I don't know,
things
but I
because
did
your
it.
body
I never felt
actually
better.
has it has a lot of lectins in it.
That's
which
one of
actually
the
are very
problems. That's
toxic.
lectins.
And you're not a cow, so eating grass is not so easy for the body to digest
We
like
also
that.
aren't carnivores.
I think we can agree that we can go on about diet for about 4 days.
We could, and you know, this is.
Can we move
A
along?
lot of different opinions here.
Yeah, you guys do what works for you.
Rural health, that's.
Let's go with the feeding cycle. And we already started to mention it already that it's best to probably give your body a rest, 12 to 14 hours a day. Some people say 16 hours a day, only 8 hours of feeding. Phil only has 4, but you know, he's in his 80s and he's looking good. And he's been doing it for a while.
Still walking.
I mentioned that some of the people like Judith Campisi up at the Buck Institute. She's the one who looks at senescent cells that actually are these cells that are kind of old in your body and you really need to get rid of them. There are some things we can talk about shortly about how to work with those things. And she finds in animals, in yeast and these little worms, that she can actually extend the life a lot by getting rid of these senescent cells, because not only do they start taking up a lot of room inside of the packed cells together, but they secrete these interleukin 6, interleukin 17, interleukin 1. These things are not good for you. Okay, exercise. You gotta move. Stand up, everybody. Let's just stand up for a second. You should be doing this once an hour, and I don't do this often enough. Just move around. And one of the things that I remember John Gray one time was talking about, and just said, just if you do things like this, your body, let your body and move your feet and just shake your body up and down. What this does, not only you feel it, you're breathing and so on, but it's stimulating your lymph flow in your body, because your lymph doesn't have a heart like the blood vessels do. It has to be moved by muscle contraction and breath, because breath is one of the other things. So just breathing, and just even for 5-10 seconds or something when you stand up.
That's
And
why
it really
exercise is
helps.
so good then,
Yeah.
because it's all
Exercise stimulates growth hormone because it tells the body, okay, this is something called hormesis. Hormesis is a really interesting thing, because what it does is basically what it doesn't kill you, it helps you. So what happens is your body gets stressed during exercise. Like I go to the gym, work out, and it's breaking down muscles, because the body goes, okay, I'm not strong enough, I need to be able to build more muscles, so it gets rid of some of these old fibers and builds some new fibers. That's hormesis, telling the body, okay, I need to do something with some process. And this happens through different mechanisms throughout the whole body. It stimulates growth hormone because the body goes, okay, I need to build muscle back up, so it's going to stimulate growth hormones. If you do too much of it later on, we'll talk about how that could be a problem. But right now, it's so important. Walk. There's 3 types of exercise in particular. There's just a regular aerobic exercise we're used to hear about. You need to do strength training and actually put weight bearing on your body, weight bearing on your bones, because that stimulates bone growth. I mean, like these astronauts that go up, they hang up there, and in 6 months and so on, they start losing bone density, and that's a problem. The last thing is you need to go and do what is called interval training. Interval training actually stimulates your body. There's some people that say even interval training, like you go into a treadmill or a bicycle and you just push it really hard for like 45 seconds or a minute, and then you just relax and just take it down for a couple of minutes and then push it up again, push it down. But you push it really hard, 30 seconds even. There's something called PACE, which I think that one is one that came out of Harvard. And it works pretty well. I mean, I love doing that because it actually makes you sweat. It makes you feel the exercise even more. So it's just going up and down, up and down. But those 3 types
you
of
can't really get to that intense unless you run, and running can actually, you can pull your hamstrings and things. There's other exercises that are better for that, for interval training.
I kind of like the bicycle.
Yeah,
no?
bicycle's great. I love it.
It's kind of like riding up a hill and then down a hill and then riding up a hill.
I
Oval
do that.
machines are really good.
I do
Yeah.
that.
Which one?
Definitely.
The oval machine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the
That's what I
elliptical,
use that.
elliptical trainer, yeah, that's good too.
Elbow?
Elbows?
Oval machine. Oval, yeah.
Elliptical trainer, maybe.
You know where the,
Exercise also forces the body, it says, I need energy. So it tells the mitochondria to turn up. And the mitochondria senses this, says, okay, glucose come in or fats and so on. Let me process you. Let me start working faster and faster and faster. That little battery in there has to be charged so it starts working more efficiently. So it just is all around. And it tells the DNA, I need to develop some proteins. So produce some proteins. I need this type of protein for the muscle and so on. So you're, it's such an important piece.
That's for endorphins, makes your brain feel good.
And does,
You feel better.
endorphins.
Like if you don't feel good, go exercise, you come back, you feel better.
Yeah,
Or go for a walk, you're gonna walk.
most of the time.
Yeah, in nature.
Sunlight. Here's an interesting one. Some new research on this too. I mean, we kind of wonder, I mean, plants with photosynthesis, they have to use the sun. So the sun stimulates the kind of like the energy mechanism, photosynthesis, the same sort of thing that we have to some extent, a little bit different in our mitochondria, and that's important for the growth of a plant. Well, guess what? We've also evolved to use the sun. Now we know about going out and having ultraviolet on our skin, vitamin D. As it turns out, it also stimulates nitric oxide because your body has on the surface of the skin called NO3. That can be converted to NO2, then into NO2 nitrite to nitric oxide. And that stimulates the nitric oxide, which is what happens. It opens your blood vessels up, allows for blood flow. If you take something like Viagra for a male, it gives you erections. That's they take it for heart problems with and so on. So nitric oxide, the Nobel Prize for that happened, I believe, in 2008 because it became such. They knew about it for a long time, just didn't realize how important it was, and more they realized it's one of the most essential signaling molecules in the body because it tells the blood vessels open up a little bit more. It tells this particular procedure to happen or this or that. Turns out even UV light stimulates things like testosterone in the cells for males and females, turns out. That's something I heard from this neurologist down at Stanford. So I thought that was quite interesting. Now you don't, of course.
Sunlight stimulates testosterone. Did I understand it?
Yeah, UVB.
Oh.
So just like, and it makes some sense that your body is using the sun. That is a lot of energy out there to absorb that energy into the body. But the next step I want to talk about is even more fascinating because something that we learned recently in the last, I don't know, half a dozen years is the ultraviolet, not ultraviolet, but infrared. The near infrared, that red color is red, and then below that in the infrared spectrum is near infrared. That one is become more and more important than we realize because what it does is it actually can penetrate up to about 6 centimeters, maybe 2 inches, 2.5 inches into the body. So if you're not extremely overweight, you can still be a stimulus. What it does actually goes into the mitochondria. There's something called electron transport chain in the which is the battery charger. I mentioned the battery that has this 140, 160 millivolts in between the inner matrix of the mitochondria and the middle part of this thing. Well, there's the last step of that before it actually turns into ATP, called cytochrome C. They found that this ultraviolet, infrared, near infrared, actually makes melatonin in there. And you go, why? I mean, it's a sleep hormone. No, it's actually probably one of our most powerful antioxidants. And because every single time you create an ATP molecule, it binds with oxygen, and that oxygen is an oxidant. So you need an antioxidant. Turns out melatonin is one of our most powerful antioxidants. We get that at night to help ourselves to sleep, but also circulates to the body, but not nearly as much is secreted from the pineal gland as there is for each one of our cells, since we have thousands and millions and billions of these mitochondria in all our cells.
So does that type of light happen naturally at sunset?
Well, it happens all day long.
But,
About
I mean,
50.
melatonin is our, we're producing it more in the evening, so I would think that would be.
Yeah, doesn't matter, because during the day you're always producing these reactive oxygen species, these oxidants that are happening. Like I said, billions and literally 100 of your body weight in ATP. Well, that's going to require a huge amount of oxidation that happens at the same time. It actually produces hydrogen peroxide, and called peroxides and things like that are very, very caustic. They can attack the cell walls of the cell in the mitochondria, can attack the DNA. There's DNA inside of your mitochondria and also inside of the nucleus, can attack that, can break these strands, cause problems with these the whole chain of DNA molecules. And so what happens is this melatonin turns out to be released inside there, and like I say, they've only figured it out. It isn't to put to sleep, put your cell to sleep. It's literally to sequester those electrons, basically, that are free, that are going to go out and grab onto a molecule and pull another protein off of there, or damage some protein on there. And that's why we have, well, we're used to vitamin C, and we hear about those things. There's our most important, besides melatonin, is glutathione. Glutathione is made in the liver, but it's made in our cells too. It turns out, and this is one thing I only learned recently, that melatonin inside the cell stimulates glutathione release. And it's actually kind of one of the important pieces that need to work together. So what happens is you go out in the sun during the day, and you don't have to be in the direct sun. You can have your clothes on. You can sit under a tree, because green leaves reflect ultraviolet and infrared off of them. You can sit under a tree and just relax and lean
It
against.
penetrates through your clothes?
Huh? Yeah, penetrates right through into the bone. Literally goes through the skull.
Wow.
Well, you said something like 2 centimeters. Didn't you say that at one time? Or
I'm
something?
sorry?
Didn't you say it went so many centimeters?
About 6 centimeters, maybe 6 to 8.
So is it better not to have clothes on then?
No, it doesn't
Like
matter.
if I have an infrared sauna, then.
That's fine.
So it's okay with clothes on then?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, simply because it goes right through the. It's a metal. If you got metal all over your body, like my belt buckle, it doesn't go through.
Well,
But,
it heats up your body too.
pardon?
It heats up your body as well.
A little bit.
For the-
Yeah,
So I use sunblock when I'm outside.
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because that's not going to block in ultraviolet infrared. Blocks ultraviolet B and A, but it doesn't block infrared.
Okay,
So
That's good to know.
good to know.
It's a good idea to take your sunglasses off when you're outside, because you need that light
Yeah.
coming through your retinas.
yeah, well, that will definitely stimulate cortisol in the mornings in particular.
So what, do you know what happens to melatonin when you're exposed to light? Because I always heard that, if you turn on the lights and have them on for a while, that your melatonin gets used up and you don't have it anymore.
Well, it shuts down the pineal gland producing melatonin, so it's not going to be flowing as freely. But if you turn off the light pretty quickly at night, then it should start back up, hopefully, pretty quickly. What I'm talking about with the infrared is not all about melatonin at night. This is really during the day when you're active and you need to get rid of all these little oxygen species that are floating around there doing damage, which is one of our probably one of the most important anti-aging secrets, because that antioxidant this oxidant is going in there, damaging the cells, damaging the DNA. So you can even get infrared. Actually, I don't think I put it in. I have this little bulb. I was going to bring the box. It's just a 250 watt bulb.
A
And,
heat lamp?
Huh?
Is that a heat lamp, Rob?
It's kind of like a heat lamp. You can use them for a heat lamp, but it's actually, I think I'll remember at the moment. But actually, it just puts out the red and near infrared between somewhere around 400, 600, 700, and 1400 nanometers. That's just a range that you can look for, and you can get the Jove, Joove is one that they've been using for years, that you can actually put these large boxes, kind of expensive, but you can do your whole body. You can get some that are smaller and they put it on your body, in small parts of your body, and work for like on your muscles or on your neck with inflammation, because it works in inflammation. Supposedly works on acne and things like, even green light works on acne, really helping with that.
So what spectrum are we talking about?
700 to 1400 nanometers.
Of red?
Infrared. Infrared. So, red's going to start somewhere around, blue is about 430 or 350, I think. And red starts somewhere around the 700 range, but then it slowly goes into the infrared range. So you just want, some people think that the best is somewhere between 850 and 950 nanometers for this infrared.
Question. Infrared, we get it from the sun. Why do we need to be buying, like, well, if we were to live totally naturally and be out in the daytime and sleep at night, why would we need an infrared lamp?
In case you're not outside.
So going outside will take care of your need for an infrared lamp?
It can, depending.
Just
Like in the
outside.
winter time,
No,
maybe it
wintertime,
isn't.
okay.
I mean, you hear about people with sad, dyspectic.
But is it light? The thing is, light is light. It's cold doesn't have much to do with it.
No.
So even if you're out skiing in the wintertime, you're going to be getting sun.
Yeah,
The
well,
angle of the sun has a lot to do
We're
with it.
probably tropical, so, the more sun, the better. It's not,
Yeah, I heard the latitude that we're at isn't conducive to us having
Right.
Yeah,
much
like
in the
anything
way
above
of.
San Diego apparently is not optimum latitude for,
Oh, God bless those poor Irish who've been living in Ireland all that time at the wrong latitude and God, how did they survive?
Outside all day.
Outside all day, how did they survive? I don't know. I'm sorry.
So Rob, if melatonin is the master ingredient, so to speak, to activate glutathione, which glutathione is the master ingredient again, that your cells need to thrive, nobody's sleeping right now. And we're having all these health issues with, most of the women I know don't sleep. So what is causing the melatonin, what is causing, do you think, a lot of this sleep deprivation?
Smartphones.
Now, we know it's EMFs, but I'm wondering, what can you do, what is it doing to the melatonin? Is it killing it, is it not? Because is melatonin a hormone? Did we say that?
it is.
It is a hormone, but nobody's sleeping. And so what is going on? What, do you know? Not nobody, but a lot of women, most of the women that I work with do not sleep. Now, they drink alcohol.
What's that
at night.
mean?
They do.
They don't
They
get
drink
enough
alcohol at
magnesium.
night.
Drink alcohol, forget it.
They stay up late, a lot of, but I'm just curious about the whole melatonin aspect of how we make that in our bodies, and when we need it for sleep. That's the whole thing, that's your whole circadian rhythm, that's what turns, you have to have it activated to be able to start slowing down and getting to bed.
well, there's emotional addictive reasons for not sleeping too,
Sure.
so that's,
And
Stress.
also looking at your smartphone,
What do you think?
looking at your computer before you go to bed.
Well, they are saying that the EMFs
Right.
are really
it's
messing
not just the
things up.
EMFs, it's the blue light.
yeah.
The
Blue
blue
light,
light.
yeah.
Drinking
No,
alcohol.
I'm talking about the towers, the 5G, all
Oh,
that
yeah.
stuff.
Well, that too.
All of that's
But
huge right
even
now.
But they probably also just need more magnesium in their lives, and an absorbable magnesium.
If you're
Yeah.
drinking alcohol every night, you're poisoning it.
A lot of it,
It is a problem. It is a problem, but that's not the only reason. Not everybody
a lot of
drinks
it is simply because our cycles have been thrown off.
I have to go home and
When you go to sleep, I have a habit, unfortunately, still going to bed at midnight. I don't sleep as well because of it. I don't get that growth hormone release that I would probably get at 10 or 11. Otherwise I would look 30 years younger. But it's our diurnal cycles, the daily cycles get thrown off. This cortisol cycle that starts in the like 7, 8 in the morning when the cortisol levels go up, and then maxes out in mid-morning to 9, 11, 10, 11 o'clock. And then it goes down, and then in the 9 o'clock cycle at night, melatonin. That's our natural cycle that our body is so used to. It evolved for thousands of years. We only had in the last couple of 150 years where we had lights all the time. And only in the last 150 years we probably had eating all the time. Or 100 years, or 50 years where we have refrigerators and so on. And stoves.
Yeah, but does food or any dietary stuff affect melatonin? I never even thought about that. I haven't really pondered that one or researched it.
I think it probably as much, it might, but I don't think so as much. I think what it does is it affects the digestive cycle. And that probably stimulates,
The gut-brain connection.
yeah, the gut-brain.
Sour cherries have a lot of melatonin.
Oh, there you go.
Used for,
I love sour cherries, but I eat those for breakfast.
for duck, yes.
I don't find that melatonin helps me
I'm
to
just saying
sleep a
that.
lot, but it does help some. Particularly if I wake in the middle of the night and I use some sublingual
Well, some
melatonin.
people, yeah, use it, and it's controversial too.
Yeah.
There's some other
Get a little GABA.
I love GABA. I mean, I know.
Valerian.
And this is people that
passion
grow on it.
fruit.
So let's move on before my machine goes to sleep here. That is what I find fascinating with the ATP and the mitochondria and so on, and the sunlight and infrared. And I mentioned the different things with UVB and testosterone and vitamin D and nitric oxide and so on. Interventions. This is where we get into some of the interesting stuff. We'll talk about NAD. NAD is this molecule. As I mentioned, its origin is tryptophan, and then all the way to vitamin B, B3, niacin. And then, but it's the currency that actually cycles multiple times inside the mitochondria and inside of the cell itself to produce energy, and it becomes a signaling molecule to sirtuins, this thing that repairs DNA and makes so many different, it decides what the cell needs. The sirtuins listen out there, and they can tell what is needed and what proteins and all this other stuff. They can't operate without ATP. It can't operate at all without NAD. So these things, NAD is probably one of the most essential things. And when you're young, you get plenty of NAD probably, in most cases. But as we get older, guess what? We don't convert NAD as well. We get NAD from our foods. I'm not NAD, but we get the precursors to it in our foods, niacin and so on, tryptophan, niacin. Then you can actually find supplements out there called NOID, which is nicotinamide riboside, which is niacin and the ribose, which is a sugar molecule. Ribose is actually, those two things are running throughout your whole thing. Your DNA is made up of chains of phosphorus on the ladder, chains of phosphorus and ribose. So this alternating sugar and phosphate. It's one of they're probably the most important sugar in the body. And even some of these nucleotides, when you have nucleotides, you see this background here. Each one of these little points, well, you can see here, and they go across like this. Those are nucleotides, actually, and the sequence of these will determine how proteins are created, because they have this exact sequence. It says just like, like this pattern on the rug, the threads in that pattern of the rug, it just determines exactly how this rug pattern is going to show. And that's exactly what happens with the proteins that come out of the DNA, from the DNA, because it says create this protein exactly this way, exactly, and replicates it out.
Pretty intelligent, the human body.
Incredibly intelligent. I mean, just phenomenal. The workings of the body, it's just almost impossible to conceive of how it works all together. And these cells, not only that, but guess what? That protein, this stretch of the protein here, most of the time they're wrapped up in these cores, wrapped in these small little clump, like around a thimble. where it's wrapped around there tightly. At that point, it can't, the proteins can't be made. The body can't, the cell can't generate the proteins because it's too tightly wound up. So it has to unspool a little bit. And when it's unspooled, then there's a certain mechanisms guided somewhat by these sirtuins that come in and actually can say, oh, here's this particular sequence of nucleotides, and I need to make protein XYZ out of it. And then, but you go, okay, how about the protein in my eye? Well, that protein in my eye is different than the one on my fingernail and my toe or my liver. And that's because part of that protein gets shut down, what they call it methylation, but doesn't matter. So it shuts down so that only part of this is exposed, and it's only those proteins that go for the eye. So it's talk about complexity, it's just phenomenal. I mean, it's mind-boggling. We're just beginning to understand a lot of it. Look, in the last 30, 20, or 30 years when we actually see the whole human genome. So
It's beautiful too, the way the structures are.
yeah,
Isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
on every level.
So you can take. Let me move on to actually individuals. These there you can take this nicotinamide NR, nicotinamide riboside. Elysium. I use a product from Elysium Health. Which was developed by this Dr. Garante from MIT. He's one of the real leaders in aging research and so on. He's a brilliant man. So,
How do you spell it? Is it up there?
huh?
The product.
ELYSIUM.
There it is.
Elysium. They actually make two different products. They make multiple products. They make one for our nicotinamide riboside, and they also take one called for nicotinamide mononucleotide. What happens is, and both of this company makes it, but there's a lot of companies that make these. Some of them are probably better than others. I chose Elysium only because of the founder of it is one of the real prominent people. Unfortunately, there's kind of this nicotinamide mononucleotide. There's a guy named David Sinclair from Harvard who is kind of trying to patent it because he developed the process of creating it, and that he can't patent the NMN because it's produced in the body every day, billions of times a day. What happens is, but you can take NR will turn into NMN, and then that kind of goes through this whole cycle process in the body, and something called the Krebs cycle. You don't have to worry about all these things, and but that produces to produce ATP, and then it goes through this cycle between billions and billions of times a day. But you can take NR, or you can take NMN. You can get both of them still. There's also one thing that it's called the salvage pathway. What it does is we can't take enough food in of niacin or tryptophan or any of these other precursors in the body every day. You'd have to have your whole weight in ATP. You can't take all that much food in. So the body has to recycle these things. And this is one of the most important pieces, this pathway. And there's a woman who started a company called Nuchido with Time Plus. And Nuchido, Nuchido. She's had her PhD in biochemistry and so on, cell biology, and she created this product because she thinks that this is the most important pathway, one of the most important pathways.
She's a savage, though.
Huh?
She's a savage, though.
Yeah. I don't know which is best. I do believe that the salvage pathway is critically important because it kind of goes through this nicotinamide, and then it goes into NMN and NR, and then cycles back into NAD, and NADH and all this stuff. So I don't know which is best. You can try them out. They're about $50 a month for these different ones, NR and NMN, through Elysian. You can try them for a month and see. You're not necessarily going to feel something in a month, maybe a couple of months, because there has been pretty good evidence from people that after taking them for a year or two, their biological clock is starting to go backwards. In other words, I heard one man said he's been taking it for about a couple of years, and he's now about 3 or 4 years younger than his chronological age, biologically. And this is looked at. There's a guy down at UCLA named Horvath. He's a doctor down there, and he created what is called the Horvath clock, which looks at your genome has all these different nucleotides on it, and when it shuts down pieces of these things, you can tell by looking at the clock, because you get older and there's more and more shut down. And so he can look at those particular called methylation pieces and say, okay, you've shut down, so your body is kind of looks like you're 60 years old, and this one's 70 years old, and this one's 80 years old. But when you can start to see that you have less of those over a period of time, and less of those methylation, it's actually starting to go backwards.
What's this test called, and who's got that test?
There's a bunch of them that you can get. It's called a Horvath clock test, but there's a bunch of them.
What is it?
Horvath, Horvath.
Okay.
He's down at UCLA. You can just Google Horvath clock. But there's
These three things, NR, NMN, or NAD, those are precursors to NAD?
yeah,
Aren't telomeres another way to test? And-
there are.
And can you test telomeres? I mean, I
Yeah.
know a lot of doctors who do.
Yeah.
Women in these babies obsessed with them. But is that similar to what we're talking about?
It is. I'll talk about it in a minute on some peptides and stuff that do this. It appears that you can affect telomeres a little bit more. Telomeres, as I mentioned before, it's like the shoelace, the ends on my shoelaces and keep them from being frayed. When they shorten too much, your cell kind of has to go, okay, I'm the end of my life, because it can't replicate in integrity anymore. So there are enzymes. In fact, there's a woman, Elizabeth Blackburn at UCSF, who got the Nobel Prize for finding telomerase, which actually go in and repair those telomeres.
Right.
And it's I would say the best clocks are probably a combination of methylation and telomere length. But you can look at each one. There's even some others. I know one that looks at 100,000 points on even this company, Elysium, has one called, and I can't remember what it's called, but it actually does. It looks at 100,000 points on the DNA to see how much methylation is happening, which is probably a better example. But there's a couple of many other ones that are actually just people are able to use and look at the DNA to see how good, how integrous the DNA is. Is it looking younger? And then you can take one. What I'm hoping to do is get a group of people together and actually go in and maybe get a discount and go in and get our DNA read and look at your clock, and then take some of these things, interventions, sleep and some of these other things I'm talking about, and see if we can actually age backwards.
Fun.
I'm in.
Sounds like
We're
fun.
in. Yep.
I think so.
Yeah, let's go.
So let me go on to some more interventions before we all...
Do you know about methylene blue?
Yeah, and I don't know what to think of it yet.
I've been taking it.
I wonder why you look
It
blue.
enhances
Well,
oxygenation in the brain.
He's an avatar.
I'm remembering words and names
Yeah,
much better than I was before I started.
it
What is it?
appears to work on the brain
Style.
some ways. And
It's
It is
It has been used to turn back traumatic brain injury
and it stops cell death.
helps with oxygenation and brain tissue.
yeah, actually, it's actually they use it to clean fish tanks and stuff.
Right.
Which you
That's why
know,
fish are so smart.
sounds really toxic, but in lower doses it does appear to
Yeah,
have
take a
some.
very low dose, a couple of drops, that's
Yeah.
all.
How long did it take before you got it back, where you could tell? You know, for a
Couple
while?
months.
Oh, all right.
It's pretty quick.
Blue tongue.
It turns your urine a little blue though.
It does.
Just be prepared.
Put that on a
That's all right.
colorful guy.
That's a pretty color.
They were using it in treating
Do a little light
COVID
show.
also.
Is it expensive?
No,
And where do you get it?
Amazon.
It's very easy, it's
What's it
not
called?
regulated.
It's
Yeah, I just want to be
methylated.
careful of the sources.
Methylene.
Yeah,
You just make sure you take a very low dosage.
yeah.
What is it called?
Methylene blue.
Methylene.
It's a
Is there a
methylated
particular
version.
product that's better than, I mean, when you say be careful with your resources, or your sources.
Well, like anything else, you just there's a lot of stuff that comes in from China. I hate to say it, but it's not as good.
They'll give you the methylene blues.
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
No, you get it, there's a lot of different companies and you have to do your own research, of course. But it's been around for 100 years.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can you possibly explain in an understandable way what the hell methylation is?
Methylation is attaching a methyl group, CH3, I think it is,
Yep.
to a protein that turns things off and on. You attach it to the genome, it will turn the expression of that gene off. Or if you have a damaged genome, it will turn that off until the repair mechanism comes along, and it will be able to see these tags that are happening on the genome and say, okay, I've got a problem here. Let's pull in the sirtuins and all these other things. Let's start looking at we can make some changes to that genome. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Otherwise, they'll leave it methylated, these methyl groups attached to it, and therefore he can't express that gene anymore. You can't change it into a protein or express it.
Why should I be getting methylated B12 instead of?
Because it's actually the intermediary between regular B12, like that you would normally get, and it's the next step inside the body, and it doesn't have to go through that conversion. So there's a lot of methylated or intermediary B vitamins that you can get that are actually much better. You can get folic acid. Folate is one that's you definitely want methylated because your body, some gene, about a third of the people out there can't handle straight folate. So you have to get a methylated version of it.
Thank you.
Well, isn't it also that most B12 that's sold is a cyanocobalamin, which is
Yeah.
actually based, it's like cyanide based, and it
Yeah.
forms crystals and it doesn't actually get absorbed, right?
It gets absorbed not very well though, not very well. You definitely want some of the better versions of methylcobalamin. There's a couple of different ones that are much better.
It's like a hydroxy one too.
Hydroxycobalamin. The reason why they use the cyanocobalamin is cheap.
Yeah.
Like anything else, I mean, it's dirt cheap, and it's just like calcium carbonate, magnesium oxide. These things don't absorb well in the body, although it does. Calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, they do help to reduce the acid in our stomach, and which is important for certain things like an antioxidant. Huh?
Don't we want more acid as we get older?
Well, you do, but if you have a gassy, let's say you have a stomach ache and so on, but your body actually, when you take hydrochloric acid, is so caustic. It's like between 1 and 2.5 in the pH scale, really, really super acidic. And once it gets down into the intestines, the body has to secrete a lot of the calcium carbonate, which it gets actually from carbon dioxide as you breathe out. So your body is using this all the time.
Do they? I know the methylated B12 is available in a vial. I mean, for injecting, and are the rest of the B vitamins?
You can get them in a capsule. I get the one that says a methylated. It has, I think, 4 of the
I kind of like to inject them
intermediaries.
every now and then. Just get a boost.
Yeah, it's nice.
Feels good.
Methylated B vitamins are, I take the ones by Jarrow, and I take them chewable and I like them, and they're powerful. But what I found when I took the SpectraCell test was that I was missing choline some, which helps with the efficacy of methylated B vitamins. And it helps reduce homocysteine in the body, which is I think it's an oxidized protein that reduces brain health and enhances cardiovascular disease. But when I did the two together,
So you took
I went
choline,
way down
took choline,
in my homocysteine. What?
so you took choline in another form or something? you
It's
said?
alpha glycerophosphate. It's easily available online. Alpha glycerosphatidyl-choline.
Oh,
Good job.
That's I did it.
it's like a,
But
it's
it's,
like a lesson.
and I'm really fussy about swallowing pills, and it actually tastes delicious to chew up the capsules.
Also, thorn methorn, methorn, T-H-O-R-N.
Orange good too.
Methylation B, because I don't assimilate a lot of my B vitamins, because that's a whole nother story, but they have a methylate, what is it called again? It's methylated Bs, and it has a whole series of things in there that are helping me to digest and absorb my B vitamins. Because when I'm under stress, I have a molecule that excretes B and zinc. Very bizarre. So people with mental health issues, they're getting diagnosed. When I have high stress, I got tested a couple years ago. It's called Pyroli syndrome, Pyrolle. It's pronounced different ways, but when I'm under high stress, I have a molecule in me that absorbs my B vitamins and my zinc and makes me pee it out. So my brain goes haywire.
Is that the pyroluria syndrome?
Yep, and I've never had anybody ever ask me or had that tested before, but the Amen Clinic, I don't know if you guys know Daniel Amen. So I did a brain scan because I was having a bunch of issues, and my son and I both, and we have concussions, and so that was a combination, the concussions, mental health issues, and what they discovered is a lot of people are getting diagnosed with bipolar, and they're not being tested. This is what they have, is that you're just not methylating and absorbing your nutrients. And I've lived that way all my life, I didn't realize.
Probably a lot of the population has without
It
knowing
is very sad. I'm trying to educate people on it if you've got mental health issues, to go get this test, and doctors won't do it. They're like, no, I don't believe it. And I'm like, you don't believe it? What do you mean you don't believe it? But it was just an eye opener for me, that it wasn't, but it's important, so I have to take I have to take certain, and I also have the NTHFR gene, which doesn't absorb, I don't absorb fat well. There's a whole bunch of factors into that, and the DNA testing has really helped me a lot. Just to know all these things about, what I can eat, should be eating, not eating, how high fat diet doesn't work for me. Oh, and the doctors wanted me to do, there were two choices with my health issue. I had to do ketogenic diet or drugs. And I was like, you're a naturopathic doctor, that's my only option. But I had done the DNA testing, and the doctor that I was working with said, you cannot do ketogenic diet. It will totally mess your digestion, it'll mess up everything. So I just started taking care of myself with, proper supplementation and diet. I really focused on being mindful of how I was eating, what I was eating. But anyway, so a lot of us just don't absorb those vitamins. Or we don't absorb supplements, and it's hard to get the nutrients as well.
Better from foods, yeah.
It's a balance, it's a delicate balance. And then
Well,
obviously,
fulvic acid helps with absorption.
yeah,
Oh, that's curious.
Which, folic or fulvic?
Fulvic.
Fulvic, F-U-L.
Yeah.
now I just heard a controversy about that one with a specialist I'm working with. She's a good friend. I use fulvic acid for an eye drop that's really fabulous, and she said there was a whole test just recently it's a very dangerous thing to take. And I'm like, I've never heard that before. She wouldn't take the eye drops, and she's got eye issues. And I do a fulvic eye drop that's fabulous.
It helps you.
Yeah, it's called Doc of Detox, and he's got an eye drop. Again, a specialist, I get all this from
Doctor
doctors.
Detox?
Doc of Detox.
Doc of Detox.
Yeah, he's got a fulvic acid eye drop. But yeah, I don't take, you can take it internally too.
Yeah, I haven't seen taking it as an eye drop. I've only seen it taking it internally so that your cells can be opened up to absorb the nutrients and supplements that you would otherwise
Right.
just dispose of because they're not getting absorbed.
Yeah, because it says you can actually take this internally. It acts as a chelator if you've got eye issues. I've got a dad with macular degenerative disease, and we have helped him in many, many ways. But he uses that pretty regularly, and when you put it in, it kind of burns. It burns. It's like, that can't be good. And then it's like, oh, now it feels good. It's chelating the crack that's in your eyes that are
That's
obviously.
fascinating.
So then when you start using it regularly, it's fine. But it's like so many things to
Did
learn.
his eye color change?
Did his eye color?
Yeah, the color.
He's blind in one eye, and the other eye he has vision, and we've been able to maintain his vision.
No, I'm saying when you look at the eye, the color of the eye, does it change?
Don't think so.
Another thing you can use is the Russians started using carnosine. Carnosine is something in the body that actually goes around and actually there's something called AGE. These are proteins and called glycation, really, which is a protein in a sugar molecule that the molecules start wrapping around each other, and they're really hard to break apart. And they're useless at some extent because that protein's sitting over there, maybe in the edge of a cell, trying to do something, but the protein when something comes by through, let's say, the outside of the cell, it says, oh, here you should be taking this in, but the sugar molecules attached to it can't do anything. Glycation, these AGE products, which is strange age, cause a lot of distortion in proteins and so on. In fact, if you take meat, sear meat above 250 degrees. I don't cook my meat above 250 degrees because that starts to cause glycation, which means it's harder to break down. So those proteins, the body just can't break that peptide bond because you can't get to the peptide bond to break it into amino acids. So
Yeah, carnosine's in all your animal products, right? Yeah, I just learned that too, and we're using that for my dad for his eyes as well, because it's tissue.
well, that's
repair.
carnitine, but not carnosine.
No, carnosine.
Oh, carnosine. Okay.
Carnosine
Yes.
as well. No, it is
Yes.
for tissue repair, because it's part
Yes.
of that whole stem cell thing that I
Yeah.
do. He's been wearing patches on his eyes.
Right.
And with glutathione and carnosine, and it has really preserved his eyesight.
Carnosine also extends his cell life, normal cell
Yes.
life.
Glutathione mixed with carnosine in an eye drop?
No, that's another thing I'm not probably should talk It's the thing I'm wearing on my neck, their stem cell activator. Are you talking about stem cell? At all?
Yeah, I am. But there's 12 different.
Tomorrow.
I thought that's where they plug in the
Yeah, that's my button, that's for turning me on and off.
She go home, her husband plugs her in, and
She
she lights up all night
She's a whole
long.
different animal.
Okay, I'm missing all this carnosine stuff. Could you run it back?
Carnosine, CROSINE. It's an amino acid. It's kind of an amino acid. It's an amino acid. Yes, it is.
L-carnosine.
Well, that's L-carnitine, but this is carnosine. L-carnitine is one of the 20 essential amino acids, not essential amino acids, amino acids, but carnosine's a little bit different. But it actually, because it loves to latch on to things and break them apart. And that's what it basically, its purpose in the body. At first, this has been around at Life Extension. If you go to Life Extension, incidentally, I also have really good methylated B vitamin, which I've been using for years. So they've been using carnosine. They actually had carnosine in the eye drops that you can use because it helps with cataracts and so on. That's actually cross-linking.
Looking for that fill at the
Carnosine or carnosine?
Carnosine.
Carnosine, yeah.
C-A-R-N-O-S-I-N-E. The O in the middle. And there's no T in it.
And also the macular degeneration, any eye disorder, because it is for tissue repair. Like we use those on anybody who's got injuries or knees, the cartilage territory. But it's amazing. And Google carnosine and see how powerful it is. What all the benefits of. I was shocked to see.
It's a bit pricey. But
Yeah, I do this. This is a trick I do with intermittent fasting. There's something called senolytic vitamins. I actually have a picture of it. Hold on a second. Senolytic activator. This is the one from Life Extension. This has got different components in it that has fisetin, Fisetin, which is a senolytic that helps get rid of these dead zombie cells. They're called zombie cells because they go around and they just cause problems, and they can actually affect other cells and so on. To some extent, they're a little bit like misfolded proteins, which actually can happen in Alzheimer's disease, and happens in prion disease. You hear about mad cow disease. That's a misfolded protein, and they can affect other proteins. So misfolded proteins happen in a lot of different cases for aging and so on. But fisetin, for certain, which you probably use for, because it's a great antiviral and so on, but it also works as a senolytic. And penogen, these three together are what is put inside of the senolytic formula. They actually add a component from black tea also, because it acts kind of like rapamycin. It's kind of like a poor man's rapamycin a little bit, which actually helps in certain cases for, I think Lori's taking, are you still taking rapamycin?
Which one?
Rapamycin?
Yeah.
Yeah. She can talk about it a little bit, what she's doing, but rapamycin is they use it a lot for using for senolytics and stuff like that too. But there's also one other thing, dasatinib, which is another drug they use, which is actually a chemotherapy drug, but will get rid of cancer cells, but they actually gets rid of old, worn out cells too in a lower dose. But there are a lot of senolytics around.
Have you ever heard of Easiac tea? Easiac tea? Easiac
Yeah.
SSAIC?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, for the cancer, right?
You can buy it at Good Earth in bulk, and I put it in all my herbal teas. Just infused with Easiac, ESSIAC, and Good Earth has it in bulk. And there was a woman who, I came across it as an anti-cancer prevention. But you were just talking about some anti-cancer stuff
Yeah,
here.
she was a Canadian doctor whose
yeah.
name was CAISSE, so they turned the letters around.
And actually, supposedly Reagan was, I think it was Reagan, supposedly cured some of cancer or something like that when he was in the White House.
Definitely not his Alzheimer's.
No, not that. I'm going to go back really quickly.
Well, he was into those jelly juices.
Yeah.
Remember?
Did you ever go into the jelly bean factory out here on 80?
Yeah.
You keep kids away from it. I'm going to talk about
Jelly bean
peptides. One of the other things, some of these things like NAD has been helping to reverse biological age by years even, a few years. Maybe 5, 10, some people say up to 15 or 20 years, biological age. So your chronological age, you're 60, and you could be 40. For some people say they're in the late 20s. I don't know. You look at their skin, it's hard to tell, and so on, but at least the mechanisms of the body, the genes and so on are working more effectively. I talked about this in the last class I gave in November, which are bioregulator peptides. Now, what I actually was the first time I saw something that was actually doing some regression of age, of the biological age. There's a guy named Vladimir Kavinson in Russia. He started about 40 years ago for the Russian military. They gave him a whole bunch of money because the Russian military, like they seem to be today, have lots and lots of problems. They can't seem to produce. They're in these submarines. They're getting irradiated by the nuclear submarines in there. They don't have good diets. So they gave him a whole bunch of money, and he was able to start looking at these bioregulator peptides. Bioregulators are actually teeny little peptides. Let me define a peptide. Peptide is a small protein of 2 to 40 or 50 amino acids strung together. Insulin's a peptide. Melatonin's a peptide.
Growth hormone.
Growth hormone's a peptide. These things are small peptides, but they're signaling molecules. So together they signal when they attach to something, they say, do this, turn this on, turn this off. They actually do that in the gene level too, and this is where he's finding these bioregulator peptides go into the gene itself. And remember I said the genome is actually coiled up in these little spools? It appears that it can loosen that spool so that actually the expression that's been shut down can be started to re-express itself. And therefore you can get more, reverse some of the aging that's happened. That's the experience, that's what, I need to order some talks. He was at a conference with one of his associates, and there's a guy named, who does some of the work with him here in the United States, Bill Lawrence. And he's actually running studies with 167 people. He's been running them for about 6 years, and he's finding, and we'll talk about the eye in a minute, but he's finding that people are starting to regress in age-wise. And he was 68, I believe, Bill was at 68 when he started it. And his biological age was like 72 or 73, so it wasn't looking good. After about 3 to 4 years on these peptides, his biological age is in the 50s. His wife is literally down in the 40s. Cavinson.
And that's by, judging by what?
The Horvath clock and the telomeres length.
Wow.
I don't know what other.
Can lengthen the telomeres?
Mhm.
Damn.
So it Bobby stimulates telomerase. Incidentally, there's a woman at UCSF who worked with Blackburn, who was the one who discovered telomerase, and they wrote a book together. Elise Epple. And she has been working with meditation and so on to do similar type things to actually help the body remove, appears to be regressing in age somewhat. And that's linking the telomeres. They've actually seen it in lab studies.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is totally awesome. And that's why, well, I'll talk about blue zones in a minute. But blue zones are this areas where there's extraordinary life. Like there's about 7 or 8 of them around the world. And these blue zones are where people live a lot higher proportion to over 100 years old.
Parts of Japan.
Parts of Japan, actually in Southern California. The Seventh-day Adventists who have a very strict diet and have a tight community. And that tight community, that caring, that friendship and so on, love and so on, is one of the main constituents that all these blue zones have. So, but that's where Alyssa Ethel, I think it is actually experimenting with and doing some work on.
So peptides, so if I was to go to the store and, so you can't like go buy peptides?
You can for, and who was it? It was Dan. You were talking about the peptides for your skin. I mean the collagen peptides. Those are peptides too. They're smaller, broken down.
For arthritis.
Go ahead.
Arthritis in my left shoulder and wrist, which is pretty bad last year. I've been taking 3 Tylenol a day for it. December I started taking collagen peptides. And as of about a month ago, no more Tylenol, no pain. Occasionally when I get up in the morning I'll feel it a little bit, but it's like night and day.
Which brand is it?
I'll have to think of it. I can tell you in a minute.
There are
I
a
can
lot
check.
of peptides like that. Which brand?
How's that differ? Is collagen just collagen? Does that have to be a collagen peptide?
You can go buy
Because
this.
collagen is what we introduce people to when they are doing the stem cells to help regrow, cartilage and tissue and things when they're using them in conjunction with vitamin C.
That's because collagen lines so much. I mean, the joints, it's the skin, lines of the gut, even the epithelial lining is partly peptides and stuff. So it's, I think, 1/3 of our proteins in the body, or something pretty high amount of proteins. What they do is, because they're larger molecules, they have to break them down so they digest them, and so you have these collagen peptides. That's why they're actually broken into smaller things called peptides now, instead of longer chains. Because you have to have longer chains, because you got to have the strength in your skin, elastin and all this stuff. But but there are excellent sources for peptides. But that's one type of peptide, mostly for the skin
Okay.
and the linings of things, which is.
But when you're buying collagen, do you need to, it needs to say collagen peptides? Or can it
Well,
just
if you,
automatically
yeah, if you want a
say that?
collagen peptide, I think it's because it's broken down smaller. Otherwise, they're large enough molecules, and maybe you're not going to break it down all the way. And they break them down enough so that they're actually into peptide length, which is less than 50 amino acids. So, and it absorbs better, and it's utilized better in the body because it goes right to the skin. Peptides they come into they're absorbed, and they go oftentimes right to where they're needed. You see the type of protein that it is, the lysine and proline and things like that, that are part of the skin,
So like
and
stem
it
cells.
just heads on off to the skin or wherever this epithelial linings and joints and so on.
Can you benefit by bone broths?
Yes, to some extent, because that has a little bit different. Bone broth, because it's the bone marrow, actually has some of the precursors for stem cells for the immune system too. Because that's where the immune system, the B cells, the T cells, macrophages and so on are generated out of the bone, the core, the marrow of the bone.
I just want to backtrack for one moment quickly. Here in Marin, you can get NADIVs. And one is at B-Love, you can get NAD injections, NADIVs. At Jisen Lab, you can get these. Of course, they're monitored in part by physicians. Do you have any opinion about injectable or IV versus oral?
Couple things. We had in our last class here in November, we had a gentleman that actually had used that along with a couple of other things. He had the IVs, and he actually had a lot of healing from
You had
it.
a lot of what?
Healing,
From it?
yeah, from an IV. There's one doctor down in this Matthew Cook. He's an anesthesiologist. Was an anesthesiologist. He's back. He's down in Mountain View area, and he's one of the big peptide people. But he called NAD the best day of your life because you give him
I was
these things.
just looking at oral versus IV or
Well,
injectable.
Oral, you can't take NAD because it's too large, and it breaks it. The digestive system will break it down into its components, and you might get NR or NMN and might absorb it, but you're kind of wasting your money because NAD is much more expensive than NMN or NR.
So might as well take a precursor.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, and there's another thing that happens. It's too large to get into the cell, but once you get it into the bloodstream, it's also a large molecule in there. And because of it, only some of the cells, like the heart muscle and nerve muscles, can actually absorb NAD. They have to usher it across. So it's easier to get NR and NMN across the cell boundary, and much easier to get niacin or nicotinamide across the cell
And do it
wall.
all orally.
Yeah.
Do it all orally, right?
Yeah. Or you can do it, but you can do it sublingually, subcutaneously under the skin into the fat and use that. And it actually does seem to work. I'd want a really good source. I wanted to try it, but I haven't really been. You need to get a source that's really going to get it from a good compounding pharmacy that knows what they're doing. Like TaylorMade is one of the best that uses
That's
it
true.
for
Yeah, I get
peptides.
several from TaylorMade.
So last time we were talking about these other peptides we could order online on the Bioreg page. Are you still of the opinion that that's the right thing?
Yeah, because let me talk a little bit about the bioregulators because they're small, 2 to 4 amino acids long. I mean, you might have 2 amino acids. You go, what good's it going to do? It appears to be the signaling. You literally, I said, goes in, can unwrap these tightly bound called chromatins that wrap these DNA molecules around them. Remember, DNA can be 6 feet long, 8 feet long, and it's got to wrap inside of something that's a nanometer. It's teeny thing. And it's got to wrap inside all this in there, and you got 23 of these, or 23 pairs, or 46 of these. You got them, you got to wrap them up in teeny little things, and then they got to be wrapped up, and then they got to extend out so they can actually be worked on to be able to replicate themselves. So let me talk about bioregulars a little bit. There's this guy, I mentioned this Bill Lawrence in regressing the biological age. There's 20 of these. Actually, it's 21 because there's one for the male and one for the female, the ovaries, and then prostate and chest and so on, and gonads. But what they seem to be working very well. This guy Kavitsin in Russia, St. Petersburg, he did this studies with at Gazprom. Gazprom is kind of like the Exxon of Russia. And a lot of their facilities are out in Siberia, really bad areas, colder than you know what. And a lot of people get sick in these. These are really toxic conditions. So what they did is they took 11,000 people and they give, I think it was 8 or 9,000 of them, they gave these peptides, and the other ones they only gave vitamins. And they gave the vitamins to the ones they gave the peptides to, so it wasn't a double blind, but it was a pretty decent one in terms of a study. And they found that, I don't think do I mention it here? Yeah, they do. That they took 3 peptides, the thymus gland, the pineal gland, and the blood. There's a peptide actually for the blood, so you can stimulate the blood flow and so on. But they actually found that they had 2.5 times less disease, mortality, and morbidity over the course of a year's time. So then they did it again with 3,000 people in another group, and they found the same thing. So they found that it was actually reduced sickness even in very toxic conditions. They also gave it in Chernobyl, when the hugely radiation problems. There was a woman that I heard on the same program I heard Bill Lawrence, Natalie Niddams. She has one called biohacking with peptides and other things. You can get her on YouTube and Spotify and so on as a podcast. But
What did they give these people?
the peptides, they gave the 3 peptides: pineal gland, thymus, and blood, I believe. The first they only give the thymus, and then they added the pineal gland to it. And they found, but what seems the pineal gland is the most fascinating one of all. It's almost unbelievable. It literally is the one that can actually trigger the telomerase to lengthen. Yeah, and it's like, what? And it's just a small 3 amino acids. So it goes in and is able to trigger these things. You can get peptides, small little peptides in your food all the time. Problem is you don't absorb them well, they don't get redirected in your body as well. And as you grow older, you just don't utilize them, absorb them well, and they don't get across the cell boundary and into the nucleus and into the nucleus. Remember, mitochondria also has a DNA inside of it of its own, which is actually comes from the mother. All mitochondrial DNA comes from the mother. And so it's changed. This is how they were able to say that 2.5 million years ago, Lucy was the first, maybe the first chimpanzee to human or whatever, was the first human because they were able to trace the genetics back that way, because the mitochondrial comes from the female. But
is this literally where are they getting this resource? Or what's the
they
source
actually
from?
get it, okay, it's not vegetarian. They actually take young cattle, calves, and they actually extract it from that.
Okay.
They developed a process, they have a patent process. They can't really patent endogluten, which is the thymus, the pineal, but they can patent the process, and they've done it over the last 35 or 40 years. They have patents here in the United States too.
Patents run out in 17 years.
I think I don't know. I mean, I think they only patent them around 2000, early 2000s.
You can tweak them every now and then.
Yeah, like drug companies do. They make a slight modification and it's all new. No, it isn't.
Have you ever heard of a thymus tap? Is it what, like
Yeah.
they beat on their chest?
Oh, yeah.
you do it gives you instant energy because it makes
Right,
you.
right. It's like tapping too, that whole
Yeah.
tapping thing does that.
But this you're tapping on your thymus, and it shrinks down, and when you tap it, it swells up and spills its hormones.
Let's not tap it.
Overage, yeah.
One of the problems is, as your thymus your thymus starts turning into more and more fat. So by the time of 30 and 40, it's about a quarter of the amount of activity. By the time you're 60 and 70, it's not doing a lot. And it actually has to do a lot in terms of the immune system, the B cells in particular.
So do you think the store looks like QI sells endolutin most reliably, or you don't know?
Well, QI comes, they get them directly from London, from England. And the guy who has them in England, there's also, let me see, down in here.
What are we
where is it?
So
talking
it got 5 stars.
Yeah, you can buy.
I bought them from them, you know.
Do you think endolutin from QI is a good one?
Yeah, because this comes from Russia.
Uh-huh.
There's 2 different types that come from Russia. One that's actually synthetic, because it's only the pure molecule itself of the thymus. And then there's the ones that come from the calves and so on, actually have a couple of surrounding proteins and different things, maybe some fats in there. And they say that over the long term you should use those, but over the short term you should use the purest form to start the stimulation process. So let's say you were taking, it's oftentimes good to start with the thymus, the pineal gland, and blood, because it not only is stimulating the thymus gland and regulates your cycles in your body, but it also the thymus gland to turn on, and they work in concert with each other to turn on the immune system more, and then the blood to open up the blood so you get the circulation. It actually, I think, may actually deal with a little bit lymph too. I'm not absolutely sure because I haven't been able to determine that yet.
And one of the
That one's
things,
at the end of the handout, this slide, everyone's taking pictures of it.
I think the
I can't
thing
see.
that,
There, thank you.
that I found most fascinating about the ones you showed us, the QI ones, is that you would take them, you'd get a 10-day
Yeah.
supply, and then that should put you back in stasis, and then you can come back, 3 months later and take a 10-day supply again. So I thought that was interesting as much as once you've uptaken it and you sort of sort it out for a little bit, you regulate it, then that's why they're called bioregulators, is that right?
Yep.
How much do these cost?
They about $55 for a 10-day supply on each one of them. Let's say your costs on $165, $170 for a 10-day supply of the 3. And then you can start adding in like liver or kidney or ovaries or bone or things like that
And these are for the peptides.
for the
These are
peptides.
the peptides.
I sometimes recommend for the first time try a 30-day supply of depending on your health and so on, and your age and so on. Start with 30-day supply of the peptide, the pineal gland, the thymus, and the blood. It gives you a really good shot for a period of time, and then you don't have to do it for 6 months. And then you can integrate other peptides like liver and kidney and bone and.
You say you do notice something or you don't?
I think it's very subtle.
Ah.
It's just subtle. It's not like they're not therapeutic peptides. There are therapeutic peptides that are not subtle, like down here. KPV. I really like KPV because using that along with a particular megaspore, which is a really good probiotic. It has a lot of spore bacteria in it. Those two really help my gut an enormous amount.
Do you have a favorite probiotic?
Yeah, pretty much right now,
Who is it?
megaspore.
Oh, it is Megaspore.
But KPV is a peptide. It's actually derived from a brain. It's a small part of a brain peptide. BPC is actually secreted by the gut, by the stomach, and the reason why it is because you've got hydrochloric acid, you've got these caustic digestive enzymes that will digest anything, a brick practically, and all the way through. And you got bio, which is pretty caustic and so on. And it has to heal itself in the process. So BPC was discovered 100 years ago or so. And they find that it just comes through and it starts healing as it goes down, as it follows the digest as it moves through this chyme, the chyme. And
So it's a probiotic, prebiotic?
no, it's a peptide. BPC is a peptide. It's called body protect compound. But it actually works when you absorb it in the body or you inject it into under the skin, it actually is really powerful and anti-inflammatory and healing in terms of like joints and muscles. And I gave it to one of my daughters. She was doing snowboarding and she just was falling and hammering and falling, and gave it to her along with some the infrared, and it really helped within a few days. I'll just say these things while I'm at it. Thymosin alpha, thymosin alpha 1. This is one of the main peptides, one of the two main peptides that the thymus gland secretes, and as you get older, it doesn't have as much. This actually is one of the main regulators of the immune system. So it can, if it's too high, it can bring it down. If it's too low, it can bring it up. And unfortunately, it had a bad rap during COVID because they found people were actually having some really good success with it. And so the FDA started cracking down, even in some of the compounding pharmacies that produced it. LL37 is an antimicrobial peptide. You can get these things through Limitless and Peptide Science. KPV and BPC you can get through integrated peptides through, these are actually ones you can ingest or spray under the tongue or up the nasal passages. QI supplements are really for the bioregulators. Like I said, there's 20 bioregulators and you can cycle them out. There's a couple of other ones that are really, we talked about the mitochondria. These two are the mitochondrial peptides. This one helps with the electron transport chain. So that polarity of that 160 millivolts of battery that's in the mitochondria, this one actually helps in moving electrons through the 4 stages of the electron transport
What is
chain.
it called again?
It's called SS31.
SS31.
I don't know actually what it stands for. I just know it's SS31. And then MOTC is another one that works inside of the mitochondria. I believe it works inside of the Krebs cycle, probably in producing NAD. There's like 8 steps in the Krebs cycle. Things like sulconate and citrate, because it's called the citric acid cycle, and malate, because you hear malic acid that you can take for energy. That's one of the parts of this Krebs cycle that it generates NAD, and then that gives that NAD to the electron transport chain, which produces the ATP and the oxygen and the reactive oxygen species that are nasty.
And malic acid also will dissolve gallstones.
Pardon?
Malic acid?
Yes.
It'll help dissolve gallstones.
Is that what's in apple cider vinegar?
Yeah, it's in
Here's an interesting thing that is just, there's a professor down at, can't remember his name, UC Riverside. He's a pulmonologist, and he has like these degrees and stuff, and he gives lectures that you can get, but he also helps give MDs enhanced, so they can get credit units or CE units. And he was talking about, he saw the study out of University of Arizona talking about long COVID. And even in COVID, what happens is there is a step in the COVID, in the mitochondria that produces this strong oxidant. In other words, it's going to chew things up. But it gets converted to this through one step to an antioxidant. And that helps with fats, because when the fats get used along in the Krebs cycle, they also produce some problematic creatures, reactive oxygen species. It turns out that the oxygen, that this conversion of this free radical to an antioxidant requires the ACE2 inhibitor, an ACE2 molecule, which we know as where COVID attaches. So it appears that COVID attaches to an area and causes the oxidation to happen and hurt the cell, cause problems, particularly in the fat area of the cell, of the mitochondria. So, fascinating thing that they found out that possibly it's one area why they have long COVID, because you can't process fats inside the cell, inside the mitochondria. Or wherever you do, it produces a lot of toxic stuff. So, I'm going to go quickly, just a couple of things back over
Didn't
here.
a lot of obese people die? I mean, they also, that was the reason why. A lot of obesity was.
Drugs, there was a study with metformin, hormone, growth hormone and DHEA that found, this is one of the first studies about 10 or 15 years ago, that found that they actually could reverse aging. So it actually was the first one that actually people's eyes woke up, and the FDA and this other one started, and a lot of billionaires started throwing money into anti-aging.
Metformin and what is it?
Huh? Growth hormone, DHEA, and metformin. Metformin's the drug for diabetes because it lowers blood sugars and lowers insulin levels. DHEA because that's a precursor to your steroid hormones in your body, and growth hormone. And close in line with growth hormone is IGF-1, and insulin growth factor 1, and that is actually one that stimulates certain growth, and particularly in taking food into the body and stimulating growth, use of the food for growth and so on.
Isn't that still a dangerous medication? Metformin. I thought it was dangerous.
Well, it's a debatable. A lot of people, diabetics, millions and hundreds of millions of diabetics have used it for years because it was the first one, the very first
Is
drugs
it
for
type 1 diabetes?
type
Or
2.
Type
Oh.
2.
I don't think type 1 use it because type 2 can only be dealt with, type 1
Type
can
1
only be
just
dealt with
insulin.
insulin.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Have you heard of Nepronol AFD for reducing fibrin? Because someone was telling me that the problem with
Nepronol.
COVID is that it causes fibrins to form, and then that causes the body pains. And that Nepronol AFD,
And
my
for some blood.
friend's been taking it just to get rid of the fibrins.
Fibrin's a big problem in a lot of cases because fibrin, which actually starts clotting, causing blood clots and so on, which is when we know these microclots in the endothelium attaches to the endothelium, and these clots happen and causes main problems in long COVID and COVID.
Is there a peptide that addresses some of that? I don't know.
Well, the blood peptide, the blood bioregulator may.
Which one is that?
I can't
I don't
remember the name
remember
of
the
it.
name.
Huh?
I don't know the name.
I should have put all the names up here, but I didn't. So I can send a sheet out that have all those 20 bioregulator peptides. I'm going to go through these quickly. We talked about rapamycin. Rapamycin, there's something called mTOR and IGF-1. I just mentioned insulin growth factor 1. This gets stimulated when you have muscle, when you're working out, because it has to build muscle. Unfortunately, it turns up the whole process system of food and energy and so on, causes more oxidation, all these things, and more damage to the cell, including the mitochondria and the gene. Rapamycin lowers mTOR. mTOR was actually studied. It was actually a fungus, I believe, they found on an island called there's an island there called Rapa something, where they found
Rapa Nui.
Pardon?
Rapa Nui, I think.
Rapa Nui, yeah. And they found this fungus out there, and they studied it, and found some really interesting thing what it does, and they actually use it for rejection, anti-rejection of when they do a transplant, because it lowers the immune system. But it turns out it also, in lower doses, helps to lower mTOR and IGF-1. But this is the crazy piece, because growth hormone raises those things. So it's this balance that you want, and which do you want? You want, when you're building muscle, to have the mTOR secreted, so you build muscle and fibers and so on in there. But you don't want that to happen when it's done doing that. You want it to slow down, lower down, because heavy expression of mTOR can be turning into cancers too. So, and cause problems inside of the genes, problems inside the genes, and so on. And Lori, I think you're doing rapamycin, right?
Yeah, I was, and then I overdosed once and I got mouth sores, which were the most awful thing, but they went away in about a week.
Yeah, because it lowers the immune system a little bit.
I was just looking up something that I saw at one point about metformin, that there's a warning about it.
A what?
A warning about metformin.
Even at low doses?
Well, I don't know how to evaluate it. I mean, I get a lot of stuff that comes through it, that it helps reduce muscle, it drops blood sugar, and anyway, it sounds like you haven't heard about anything like that. Right?
Well, no, I have. I mean, because there are warnings about metformin.
What kind of warnings?
Yeah, I mean, it's used improperly, but like I said, hundreds of millions of diabetics have used it. And interestingly enough, those diabetics, compared against those who do not have diabetes, that don't take metformin, live longer.
Say that again.
Yeah, those who take metformin and who are diabetics have less problems and seem to live longer than those who do not take metformin.
That's interesting.
But that have diabetes.
That have,
Type
Not
2.
necessarily.
yeah, possibly with diabetes. I
But
can't
type
remember what the
Type 2 is
statistics.
a reversible, it's diet.
It's totally
Well, it is.
reversible.
It's totally
So-
lifestyle.
Right, so.
Is that insulin
But
resistance?
low dose metformin is supposed to be
Yeah,
Oh.
it is low
So
dose.
people using it as a.
low dose.
as
So I've been
health
taking it once a
benefit?
day, is that?
You can take it twice a day, oftentimes. Just what you really want. Do you have a glucose monitor?
No.
Okay, you can get these glucose monitors, which will measure your glucose, report it to your cell phone, and see what your glucose levels are, and then you can see if you spike when you eat some food and it spikes way too much, you know that particular food really kind of sent you through the roof. Too much insulin release, and that's I haven't. You got to get a physician to be able to recommend that one. So my Kaiser physician is not going to do it.
That's Free Libre.
Pardon?
Right? F-R-E-E, new word, L-I-B-R-E, you can,
Free lib.
Free Liberty.
I got it as a, so you also,
Yeah, you
you
didn't have to have
monitor your
prescription,
blood
right?
sugar.
So it's best to use the
No,
metformin
yeah, I
in
did.
conjunction
Which
with
brand
a
do you use?
I would say
glucose
so.
monitor.
Yeah, because you don't want your blood sugar to go below like 70 or something. But you want to stay at.
Some people are asking that.
I thought you had to get a prescription, your doctor had
You
to do
do.
that.
You
So
do.
it's not, and it's expensive too, it's not cheap.
It's about 300, but you can actually just get a regular glucose monitor
Yeah,
and it,
prick your finger
and prick your finger and see what
multiple
it is.
times. I mean, it's still, but the thing is, it's nice to have because it shows the graph on your cell
Yeah.
phone. And you can just go and read it and read it and read it and read it.
And what is the brand?
I don't know. I really
Just put
don't.
another patch a little bit lower.
really
than what
doesn't
your
matter.
doctor is.
It's probably the cheapest one.
It took me quite a while to get the metformin, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got it, and,
You have all these
but the
patches.
usage is a
Part of
little
prescription,
iffy.
right?
I
Interesting.
mean, I don't know.
Get off that.
That's why this blood sugar test, I mean, to be able to have this constant monitor
I do.
is good because you can see where you want to, when you need to take it and when you need to back off and
Let's
so on.
let some of the light out.
So, because let's remember, glucose and insulin are toxic to the endothelial lining. It just is. And your body is meant to really latch onto it immediately and usher it off to the cell And it doesn't want it floating around out there. It just doesn't float it because it wants to get rid of it.
Keep the fat
Either
out
that
of
or
the
it takes it out of the blood, have the liver or the kidneys. Well, the kidneys can't really do it. You don't want sugar coming out through your urine. That's not good. So you want the liver to process again, take it and store it, or you want to send it off to the fat cells. And fats will actually, particularly brown fat, has a high amount of mitochondria in it, and it'll turn it into fat and actually process it. Incidentally, there's of course, one thing that you have to do, and that is we got to stay at somewhere around 98.6 degrees. Sugar, fats, all these things burn, and they actually produce energy. Besides ATP, they actually supply heat to your cells. So your cells heat your body, and that's how we keep it nice and warm.
So is this testing for blood sugar invasive, or how does it work?
It is. It just kind of attaches onto the back of your arm in case it just kind of goes, I think it's just under the skin.
But can't you tell somewhat too that when you're hungry all the time or you are tired, that you're definitely, blood sugar is way off? You know, like we used to think eating a whole banana was good for us, and now they're saying, oh man,
No, it's not.
you have to be so careful. But I notice my husband's hungry all the time, and he eats a lot of simple carbs for breakfast, and he's an extremely intense exerciser. Then he got vaccinated. Now he's got an enlarged heart. He's got heart issues right now and cardiovascular stuff. And it's like he doesn't want to hear it, but he's addicted to simple carbs. But I notice him eating in the morning, you know, whether it's a piece of gluten-free toast, but he still puts nut butter on it. Then he has his caffeine. Then he has his oats. He thinks oats are like so healthy, and that's
They're
been
also high in
There's a lot of there's
lectins.
information about oats now.
and oat milk. Oh my God, you know, there's a whole
Almond
thing.
milk's worse though.
Your body,
Is it?
All the nut milks
But
are really
oats-
high in lectins.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, but
That's
oats are
very
supposed to be
true.
like. But anyway, the point is I think you can tell a lot when you're tired often and you're hungry all the time. I mean, that's what I've noticed without
when you
doing
have too much insulin, it makes you hungry. Because it's looking to bring that insulin down.
Exactly. So that's why you need your satiating foods. You need those complex carbs, and you should be eating protein for breakfast.
And not just appeasing the candida.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But anyway, I just thought that was another way to monitor it, so you don't have to do this, because it's popular now to do these glucose monitors, because again, but it's complicated too. I've done
It
the
is.
finger pricking, and that's like a pain in the butt too.
It is.
Pain in the finger.
Pardon?
Pain in the finger.
Pain in the finger, it hurts.
Well, you do it to the butt, that's a problem.
Right.
You talked about your husband, and there is a I think it's cardio something. It's one of the bioregulators for the heart. Yeah, but I would say for somebody who's got, like I have arrhythmias because I had a mitral valve, I had mitral valve repair done at Stanford and so on, but I still get arrhythmias. I get sick, I gotta watch out because my heart is still a little bit too sensitive to these things. So the cardiac bioregulator, heart bioregulator, which also deals with the blood and so on, is a good one to start for a month, along with the thymus and the peptide, the pineal. So it's one way to start too.
Okay, thank you.
I will try to send something out. I mentioned these blue zones. Loma Linda, California, down there, there's a small group of about 10,000 people who are Adventists. They're still a very tight community. Probably hard to say if they're really still this good of low. They're still in the blue zone territory, but it seems like it. Mostly are vegans, vegetarians, and they have a lot more plant foods in their diet. Not necessarily, they use fish maybe and so on, but they're mostly vegetarians. Strong social community. That's one of the things, because there's a lot of caring, and they religious worship together and so on. And they exercise, they walk, but they don't necessarily run. They're not going out to the gym. They're just moving all the time in their body. I'm washing my clothes, or I'm doing this, or this. They're moving. Bouncing up, down like we did earlier. Okay, research. Some really interesting stuff. These are called Yamanaka factors. There's a Shinya Yamanaka in 2008. He found a very fascinating thing. he found that stem cells in the skin, he could take, because like the stem cells, the hair, the stem cells at the base of that root of the hair to replenish the hair, then my eye, and every part of my body's got its own stem cells. The problem is they are the stem cell for that hair, for that skin, for that eye, for the heart muscle, the liver, the kidney, whatever else. The joint, the bone, these stem cells for the brain, bone. He found that he could get these stem cells and he could actually, through certain procedures, turn them into what is called pluripotent. It means they become pluripotent stem cells. That means that skin stem cell can turn into an eye cell, or it can turn into a nerve cell, can turn into any of the other cells in your body. That's the gold standard for pluripotent. And these are 4 transcription factors, these 4 here, that he found that he could turn off and on and actually start turning these stem cells into other types of stem cells. Really, I mean, he got the Nobel Prize for it. I mean, it's phenomenal because they've never been able to really, outside of cord blood and the cord, the placenta and so on, which is kind of, at this point, it hasn't completely turned into one type of cell because it's the baby, it's supposed to turn into everything. And so there's big problems with that. Obviously some people have a lot of problems with using these.
But it's also very expensive.
It is very expensive. So if you could take these skin cells or any of their cells and turn them into these pluripotent cells, and incidentally, here's an interesting thing that this David Sinclair found back at Harvard, and he found that there is a copy in the genome of exactly your genome before it's been modified, before it's been methylated or changed or anything like that.
It's the original.
The original, basically the original.
The blueprint.
And with these Yamanaka factors, you can turn this stuff off and on, these genes off and on, and regenerate. And what they did in mice is they were able to turn these genes, do some trick to the gene inside the eye, and they actually started causing blindness. But then with these Yamanaka factors and the pluripotent stem cells, they were able to turn it around and turn these genes back on. And they found that they could literally take over a period of time and continue to renew those cells. And a mouse that usually lives 2.5 years might live 5 or 6 years.
That's a green mile.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This is really the cutting edge of genetics and cutting edge of anti-aging.
And which researcher is doing this right now?
That's David Sinclair back at Harvard, but the one that started Elysium Health is also back at MIT, is also pioneers in that. There are a bunch of people around the world who are doing it. The Buck, they're doing the same thing. So they actually are coming through a clinical study, the first clinical study that they're doing. They usually have a clinical study and goes off to a university and does it like UCLA or Harvard or something. But they're starting their own personal clinical study themselves. So they got funding. And clinical studies are very expensive, cost like $1 million for this one study of people. And they're actually giving them
Money.
you're giving them money to last longer. Sorry, I'll think of it in a second.
So is it something we want?
Ketones.
We want to get on the study is what's the important part.
They're giving them ketones. You can actually buy ketones, which are, what happens is in our gut, in our large intestine, the bacteria create ketones because that feeds the gut bacteria, the lining of the gut, and makes it healthy. But we absorb these ketones, and these ketones can provide energy, as I mentioned, to the brain and to every cell in the body. Well, you can get these ketones, and you can use them, and it actually helps your you stay in ketosis a little bit longer if you're doing a ketogenic diet.
Where do you get them?
This one, they actually has, Amazon has
Just
this
go
one.
to Amazon and go buy ketones?
Yeah,
Go to,
It's liquid.
Go to drboz.com. She give you a big jar of
Dr.
them.
Boz, B-O-Z?
.com.
Well, we'll see how good they are, I don't know.
She's a pretty, I have a lot of faith in her.
And that's for what?
They give you the little, a jar, these little
Keto.
Oh, the little tablets.
It's MCI,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
They're fatty, they're actually, strangely enough, a glucose molecule has a certain structure and ketones have a structure in the middle. Actually, fructose is a ketone, but it's just a little bit different.
Sounds like a sugar dump.
Yes. It's like that, but it's actually processed different in the body.
Instead of burning sugar, you're burning fat,
Yeah.
which is cleaner.
Because the body turns fat into, and it turns excess glucose also. You know, your body, too much glucose in your bloodstream will actually, through osmosis, go across into the cell, not through the normal mechanism. But the cell goes, I can't deal with this because it's toxic, so it turns into ketones to some extent.
But those are usable, right?
Huh?
Ketones are usable and beneficial.
Oh, yeah.
right?
As I said, they're the fuel that your cell lining of your large intestines has to live on. These
In the brain
bacteria-
too?
Huh?
Brain too, I think?
In the brain too, can use them ketones. You can't use fatty acids because fatty acids can't get across the blood-brain barrier, but they can use the ketones, and the ketones, as I mentioned, schizophrenia and bipolar and things like that are really actually, and you know, other brain problems. So, I wanted to talk a little bit, I kind of skipped ahead with the bioregulators. These are insulin, ACTH, oxytocin is a peptide. We know that is the bonding, but the love hormone. So these things are great things. There's 7,000, and I've heard recently somebody say 80,000 peptides in the body that they discover. They discover it all the time because they find all different uses. Because these little proteins, and besides the fact that they can build on these amino acids and turn into longer chains and become proteins themselves. These are some things that some peptides do. There's these GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, and growth hormone releasing peptides. They actually will stimulate growth hormone. Instead of injecting yourself with the growth hormone, which means that you basically are doing it under the skin, subcutaneously, instead of that you can't regulate because it just is a bunch you throw under the skin. It's high growth hormone all day long. That's not. We normally have about 8 to 9 pulses of growth hormone in a normal person in a daily time excreted. And it goes up and down as needed in the body. You can't do that with injecting growth hormone. But you can with these growth hormones, releasing hormone, and growth hormone releasing peptides, because they will stimulate. And one of them is called CJC 1295, mixed with another one called ipamorelin. A lot of people use this, bodybuilders use it, but a lot of the biohackers use this one because it stimulates growth hormone in a benign way, because you don't want to overstimulate it. But it actually,
That's the first picture.
and it actually helps you lose weight too. A lot of people use it for losing weight.
Which one is that?
The CJC 1295 and ipamorelin. There's another couple. I think I brought the book with me, but it's tesamorelin. I can't remember. There's actually a weight hormone that for reducing weight these days. It's actually the big thing out there.
Ozempic,
Yeah, Ozempic
or
is.
Wegovy, or
Yeah, semaglutide is what it is. It's the name of it. They find that they've turned it into a drug, You have to buy, it's very expensive, like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month. But they find that they're losing sometimes 15, 20, 30, 25% of their weight for obese people. The problem is when you,
Will they keep it off?
If
the
they
problem is
don't
you
change
stop
their
it.
habits, they will be back.
Yeah, but you got to change your
But they will
eating
lose it.
habits. If you change your eating habits with it and go into a much lower glucose state, and maybe adding metformin and so on into it, maybe it will stay off. But there's some second generation ones that are looking to be even better that don't cause the problems with it, that we're putting it back on.
You have to drug
There's
the rest through.
one called 5-amino and 1-MQ, which also does a similar thing, which also increases NAD levels in your body. So a natural way of increasing NAD inside of the conversion of nicotinamide into NAD and so on. There's another one, FOXO4, which actually gets rid of these senescent cells. These are all things you can get through the various peptide vendors. Unfortunately, you're going to go to the peptide site unless you get them through like a compounding pharmacy. It's going to say this is for experimental animal use only. And don't necessarily be turned off by that, because this is what they have to do to get around the FDA. Because the FDA is going to come and try to shut them down if they ever say, "Oh, use it for humans." Nope, you're gone. So.
Wow.
I mentioned BPC already, body protect compound. KPV I mentioned. GHK with copper
Money is the thing.
is also really good for healing inflammation in your body, but particular joints and tears in your muscle and so on. Anti-inflammatory. Deep sleep inducing peptide. This one actually helps with sleep and getting that deep sleep. At least I haven't tried it, but that is what a number of people claim it can do for a lot of people, not everybody. I mentioned thymosin alpha-1, this amazing thymus peptide, but there's also one called thymosin beta-4, which is another component in the thymus gland. It's more anti-inflammatory, but there's different parts of it. The first part of the 42 amino acids is used for cutting down inflammation. The 17 through 23 is used for stimulating growth, which you don't want to have by any chance if you have cancer. The 37 through 42 is really good for cardiac things. Then LL37 I mentioned before, which is an antimicrobial peptide, which is pretty potent for killing microbes, bacteria into your system, viruses, fungus, and so on. Whoops.
Molds, perhaps?
It's hard to tell. Like I have mold in my sinuses. Not mold, I have infection in my sinuses, but it doesn't show up as mold, but some people do, and they can use this. But it's difficult because it's technically your sinuses are out exterior to the cell, to the cell, just like the gut is exterior. It's not inside the body. You think it's inside the body, you think the sinuses are, but it's actually on the surface, so it's not there just like your skin is. Metabolism here, metabolism, I mentioned MOTC for the mitochondria, semaglutide for the weight. PT141. This is one that actually, for some people, can stimulate sexual arousal. It's actually part of the one of the hormones from the brain. PT141.
Yeah,
It does sound like it, doesn't it?
comment on that. So I had that about 2 years ago. I gave it to the boyfriend I had at that time. He had an erection lasting very, very long, many, many hours.
Yeah.
I was hyped up and I think my blood pressure went up and I felt uncomfortable and kind of nervous.
Yeah.
And so he kind of liked it. I didn't.
Mm-hmm. You got to start low too. It depends on what your dose
Well, we
was.
were doing the recommended dosage, but
Which is what, 1.5 milligrams?
Men more than women.
It probably does, but women can take more than men do to stimulate it. but you've got to start low on a lot of these peptides because you just don't know. Particularly this one can cause nausea, and you probably had
Yeah, I
nausea,
didn't have that, but
Yeah.
I had nervousness.
nervousness and stuff. But if you start lower, and then your body kind of gets used to it, it is part of the melanotan 2 hormone in the body, which actually will give you the whole melanotan will make you tan, heavily
Yes, that's
tan.
right.
But KPV, as I mentioned before, and PT141 are small parts of the melanotan 2 hormone
Right.
peptide.
What's the one that causes someone to be all orange like Trump? Is that the?
It's called the suntan
It's
lotion.
kind of like the
Pancake 131 is what it is.
yeah, that's kind of like I don't know, some kind of
Did you call that a
I
melanotan?
don't even know what to call it.
Melanotan 2.
Yeah.
Melanotan 1 and melanotan 2, they're brain peptides, but they have different
Is that
components
the
to them.
Down syndrome one or something like that? Or?
Well, there's
I'm just
a lot of
kidding.
brain
I'm
ones.
just
It's called cerebrolysin,
just
Cmax,
kidding.
and C-Lank.
I'm just kidding.
They're 3 brain peptides that are really good.
I was making a Trump joke. So.
Yeah, I know. It just drives around in a golf
I'm getting
cart all day
tired. It's
long.
time to go home.
It is.
So it'll actually
We're
turn you
actually
tan?
past our
Huh?
time.
It'll actually turn you tan?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and some people go, they turn so tan they look like they were turning black.
Oh my
So
God.
you just have to be careful with it.
they
But it can
don't
cause
care
sexual arousal
Away
too.
from being gray.
What happens if I give it to my black girlfriend? Then what happens?
I don't actually know.
She'll turn purple.
There's Kispeptin too, which is an interesting one because it can stimulate testosterone in males and females.
Which one is that?
Kispeptin. Kispeptin is actually it stimulates in the pituitary secretion of certain hormones.
How do you spell it? I can't.
KISSPE.
KISS?
Kispeptin.
K-I-S-S-I-N-G. First
No,
comes
it
love, then comes marriage,
No,
then comes
it
glory in the
isn't.
baby carriage.
And the kispeptin is what?
Kispeptin is it can stimulate testosterone in males and females,
PEP.
and females need testosterone too. I mean, testosterone is what stimulates males and females to a sexual arousal.
So with
Among
all
a
of these,
couple
or
other
some of
things.
these, can you create an effect that you would normally get by taking testosterone?
It seems to raise free testosterone. I have not taken it. I have it at home. I haven't taken it. I don't yet because I want to raise my free testosterone. My testosterone, regular testosterone is okay, but free is low. And that is, well, for males, it can cause lassitude and lower energy and things like that, less muscle growth and so on. So there's an interesting site called peptidesciences.com, and where is it? Here it is, right here. Peptide Sciences. This one actually has all these peptides that you can get, again for animal use only, non-human use, quote, experimental use only. But they have a lot of good descriptions of these things, even how the mechanism, how it works. Analyzed by a doctor who, from Case Western, I think is where he's from. And he analyzes each one of them and looks at all the research and gives you all the list of articles that are written about it and so on. So I find it invaluable for learning about some of these. And then you can start going into the articles and start the publications, start chaining through to try to understand the science a little more, which I tend to do. Let me back up here, I think. Oh, brain peptides, that was Kispeptin for the testosterone. Solank, Cmax, dihexa, cerebromycin, these can increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulates growth in the nerves. And from what I can tell, the myelin sheath in the insulin in the brains around it wraps around nerves. And it can help for other things. Some of these C-Lank and cerebromycin dihexa in particular has worked for has helped for Parkinson's. So
Which one?
dihexa. There's
Oh,
there's another
dihexa.
one, huh?
Yeah, I've used that. Huh. I didn't notice an effect, but.
Some of these are a lot of these because they
Yeah, dihexapeptide.
yeah. They don't necessarily, the problem is you put them, you inject them, and they don't always easily cross the blood-brain barrier. You have to shoot them up your nose to some extent because that actually,
I read
gets-
that with the same YouTube we both watched. Yeah.
yeah. You can do that up the nose because it's so close. And your very interesting thing is the eye is actually an extrusion of the brain. It's the only thing we have that's outside of the blood-brain barrier, which is your eye. So, but it's very close to the sinuses in here that actually cross the blood-brain barrier. It's small enough.
They
And that's
should
what
make it-
peptides do.
They should make it in a white powder, that'd be very popular.
Oh, they
It
do,
comes in
believe me.
white powder.
Thanks, David. These are the different Can Labs. Was a place where I used to get peptides. This guy, Jean-Francois Tremblay, Canada started cracking down there across there. And so it's like you, it's hard to get them through them anyway. But he's one of the big peptides people. And unfortunately, Canada starts saying he couldn't sell them in Canada anymore because the Canadian government said no.
What about Mexico?
Huh?
What about Mexico?
I don't know if I trust Mexico. You could find a really good source. There's guys down in down south of the border, all the way down into Costa Rica, and they use J. Campbell. I think Lori, you
J. Camel?
Campbell.
Not Joe Camel.
He's not a Campbell. He wrote this book, J. Campbell, and he's big in peptides. He's been doing them for 10 plus years. He's huh?
I don't think I am familiar.
I think you mentioned him to me, maybe originally.
Campbell, I didn't.
But anyway, he is one of these big bodybuilders. Oh, he and his wife.
Oh,
So-
yes, they were running a series online.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's got podcasts and stuff. So
I'm getting punchy.
huh?
What's his name?
Yeah, it is.
Campbell.
Campbell.
We should be ending.
You can get this book. It's just recently out in March. So
I'm getting punchy.
It's
What's the name of it?
therapeutic peptides. And he talks about all the ones for weight loss. He like is down to 7 or 8% body fat. So anyway, we're pretty much, I think, close to the end.
We know everything about health now.
These I gave you some papers that show you where to get some of these things and to look at peptide sciences and see, okay, maybe that's okay, and then start investigating more. There's a lot of doctors out there, Matthew Cook I mentioned, and Kent Holtroff, and these people who are doctors, and that actually, and their whole,
This was a handout?
Yes.
Yeah, that was.
there's whole groups of people who actually, who are functional medicine people and so on are using, in particular, prescribing. Eric Gordon and his cohort here in Marin, they use peptides, and so does, who's the woman at the Clear Center? Lori, Jane, no, Jane? She's an MD at the Clear Center, and she started a new group with another one. They use peptides.
You know, I do think in your last lecture you mentioned Eric Gordon as, familiar with peptides, and
Right.
I also mentioned Morgan Camp.
Morgan Camp, yeah.
They both spend, they're both very familiar.
Right. And they use it therapeutically. I haven't seen heard for anything, I don't know about Morgan, but I know Matt Cook down at, who is good friends with Eric and
But if someone
with
wants a
PT.
doctor to guide them.
Right. My problem will only be with Eric is it's very expensive to get in to see these people. I mean, it's like $600 to $800 or $1,000 for the first workup, and then for a half an hour it's $400 after that. It gets pretty expensive, but they can give you the the peptides and guide you along the way. And Lapita, his cohort there, is very, very good at peptides also. And there's another ND there who also works with peptides at the Gordon Medical in Santa Fe.
Gordon Medical.
Oh, his partner, you mean
Nafisa,
Nafisa?
yeah.
Nafisa.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, I think that's enough. I gave you some of these things to look at, 4 sheets. Hopefully that will help. I want to try on the last thing, and that is, I want to try to put groups together to be able to try to somehow do age testing and see if we can move forward in some ways, and do a small study. I even mentioned it to the head of the Buck Institute, because what they do is they're always looking for volunteers in the next phase of the study using these ketones. I mean, if we could have a whole group that would go in there.
So what we do is contact you if we want to participate or something?
Yeah, hopefully I'm gonna go to one of their conferences up in May, and hopefully we'll find out more.
About ketone.
Well, they're just using ketones to see if it causes longevity. Yeah, we've got to deal
Buck's
with.
got something going on?
Huh?
Buck has something going on soon?
Yeah. Well, there's because I belong to UCSF, I can get into some of these things where the certainly like UC Berkeley and Stanford and so on. I can get into these places that normally I don't know how easy it is to get in unless you have some associations. But luckily I do.
So you'll guide those of us who are interested to get in?
Yeah, because I've been working on it and wanted to be able to do this. I want to get. We decided probably not to do wholesale of these products, but I talked to the guy who's head of Key Supplements, Vlad, and we can get. But we kind of decided not to do the, the retail of it, wholesale of it, which would help us to get the price way down. Or I could get them out of London, which is directly from.
Okay.
But we'll see. But we can buy them lots and large lots and maybe get much discounted prices too.
It's mostly what, we have to be careful. This is what we have to be. And exposure. Well, thank you very much, Rob.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see the people who are highly motivated